Please take your seats. Our program will begin in 3 minutes. Please take your seats. Our program will begin in 2 minutes. Please take your seats. Our program will begin shortly. Please silence your mobile devices. Welcome to the YWCA Why Women Vote 2024 National Town Hall. To begin our program, please welcome the principal of Q Plus Collective and the co-facilitator of the Gen Z Advisory Council, Seven Winchell.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. With gratitude and respect, I join you today on behalf of and with the YWCA for this land acknowledgement. The YWCA USA acknowledges that the land on which we physically gather is the traditional territory of the Lenape-Hoking people. We acknowledge that the first peoples who were here since time immemorial were betrayed and colonized. We honor the ancestors of these people, their strength, and their endurance. We also acknowledge the ongoing impacts of settler colonialism, which include genocide, land theft, forced displacement, forced assimilation, kidnapping, forced labor, and the ongoing exploitation and exclusion that continues to impact Indigenous peoples. We recognize that the harms are ongoing and that we are all responsible for the work toward justice and healing. The YWCA USA also acknowledges that the United States and its governing and financial systems are built on the brutality of forced and unpaid labor willfully extracted from people of African descent and their relations through transatlantic enslavement. We honor the spirits of those who were taken from their homes and perished during the Middle Passage, those who made it and continued to fight for Black liberation in various ways, and those not yet fertilized. We recognize that the systems of colonialization and enslavement remain embedded in the fabric of the United States and result in ongoing anti-Black violence and carnage, including lack of safety, capitalism, exploitation, and death in Black communities and families. The YWCA USA vows to make transparent the contributions of people of African descent to building the nation state then and now. We are committed to addressing anti-Black racism and achieving Black inclusion systemically and structurally with leadership from Black people. We offer these acknowledgements as a small step toward honoring the history, culture, and resilience of those who continue to be marginalized as they struggle for basic human rights. Because we wish to create more just and equitable spaces and act in allyship, we must continue to acknowledge all privileges and be mindful of how these dynamics live in us and the systems we have created and do our work to alter that. Thank you.
YWCA USA is proud to have the support and collaboration of community and civic partner organizations in hosting the 2024 National Town Hall. Let's welcome them to the stage. Please welcome the Executive Director of When We All Vote, Beth Link, the Advocacy Manager of the AAUW, Kalina Meyercheck, and Pennsylvania Field Organizer for the Human Rights Campaign, Maggie Moore.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you so much to the YWCA for having us and for creating this incredible space here in Philadelphia. It is an overcast day in Philadelphia, but we're bringing the energy, we're bringing the sunshine here and throughout the conversations this afternoon. My name is Beth Link. I'm the Executive Director of When We All Vote, an organization founded in 2018 by former First Lady Michelle Obama. I bring regards and welcome from Mrs. Obama, who has reminded us and continues to remind us that as we are 58 days away from Election Day, now is the time to get moving, to get going, and to act. It's the time to make sure that we're getting registered, that we're making sure that everyone around us knows the dates, the deadlines, when and how to register to vote, has the information that they need, and then ultimately is voting. This year, it is so energizing and exciting to see the power of young voters. Half the electorate is millennials and Gen Z voters, and there are 8 million new voters this year who will vote in their first general election with a presidential candidate. That's exciting, that's energizing, and that is a real opportunity to change and build a new generation of voters, and we're really excited to be doing that alongside the WCA and in conversation and in community with all of you here. At YWomenVote, we do 3 things. We, 1, work to close the race and age voting gap by ensuring that folks are registered to vote and have the tools that they need. We, 2, are looking to increase participation in each and every election. We know that for young voters, there's a 20% gap between those who are registered to vote and those who actually vote, and that's on all of us to increase turnout in our communities and to get folks ready and activated to vote and make voting a celebratory community experience. The 3rd thing we do is we work to change culture around voting. And that's what we do with every single one at home who's listening, in the audience here in Philadelphia, to ensure that we're increasing the number of folks that are talking about democracy, talking about voting, and ultimately changing culture, yes, for November, but also for the future. So excited to be in community with you, and welcome.
Thank you all. AUW has been fighting for equity for women for over 140 years. And in my time with AUW, it seems attacks on equity are coming from all angles. Even the freedom to be who we are is at stake in this election. It can feel overwhelming, but I'm energized. I'm energized by my team at AUW, our members and advocates, and by everyone in this room and tuning in today across the country. Thank you, YWCA, for creating this space. And thank you all for using your voices today and at the polls in November. I'm honored to be here in community with you all. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and for allowing HRC to be an anchor partner for this amazing event. My name is Maggie Moore. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a field organizer for the Human Rights Campaign in Pennsylvania. My job is to mobilize volunteers and supporters, to educate and inform, and ultimately to elect pro-LGBTQ+ candidates. It's deeply personal work for me because I have the privilege of coming from a big, beautiful rainbow family. You see, my sister Kate is a lesbian, my teenage daughter Sage is queer, and I have a trans nephew named Elliot. And they all deserve to live safe, healthy, fulfilling lives and to be loved and adored for who they are. I first got involved in politics when I was in high school, when my friends and I held a candlelight vigil for our community following a school shooting. Our need to respond to a world in pain spurred us forward, and hundreds of people gathered that night nearly 25 years ago. We were young and feisty, and we wouldn't take no for an answer. We held press conferences and gave news media interviews. We promoted the idea that children should be safe in their schools, and we helped cultivate a space for our community to mourn and heal. Violence tried to take away our power, but we took it back. My message to you today is that you also have that power. Politics is for you, exactly as you are. That cause that's important to you, fight for it. That movement that inspires you, join it. That voice deep inside of you that says, I want to serve, listen to it. Early in my career, I was told that I was too young, too girly, too loud, too silly, too disabled, just too much. But what I realize now is that those are exactly the qualities that make me great at my job. I dive in head first. I cause a commotion. I am unapologetically extra, and I am making change happen. And you will too. Your generation is stepping up all around the country. You're using your power as voters, as volunteers, as organizers, and maybe one day as candidates. We need your voices. We need your power. We need you. Join us on the campaign trail this fall by going to mobilize.us/HRCPA if you're in Pennsylvania, and mobilize.us/HRC to find ways to get involved around the country. Take it from this elder millennial. Girl, you got this. Thank you. Evan, up.
Now, please welcome the Vice President of Policy for the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and Black Women's Roundtable, Ebony Baylor. The President and CEO of MANA, a national Latina organization, Amy Hinojosa, Fellow of Register Her, Sharon Bodiata-Dipe.
Good afternoon. Are you vote ready? Are you vote ready? Woo! All right. Again, my name is Ebony Baylor, and I'm here with the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. I bring greetings on behalf of President Melanie Campbell. We want to thank the YWCA for hosting this important Gen Z town hall. For over 20 years, the National Coalition has been engaging and training the new generation of civic leaders and political activists. Our students and youth community activists are empowered to participate fully in the democratic process and focus on attaining greater social and economic justice for the Black community. The youth presence, your energy, and your vote will save our democracy. We need to ensure that our voices are heard where it matters the most, in the voting booth. So I ask you again, are you vote ready? Do you have a plan to vote for the upcoming election? If not, don't worry, we got you covered. Visit www.unitycoalition.org, where you can register to vote, verify your voter registration, find your polling place, and even sign up to become a poll monitor. It is very critical that you verify your voting information, because on election day, your polling location can change and everything is happening, so please verify your voting information. So again, thank you so much, and please follow us on NCBCP on all social media platforms. Remember, your vote is your voice, and we need your energy and every single one of you to make sure the voices are heard loud and clear.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Hinojosa, and I'm the president and CEO of MANA, a national Latina organization. For 50 years, MANA has strengthened Latinas in our community through mentoring, education, and advocacy. Today, I want to talk to you about power. The power you have not only to organize and work toward change, but the unique power you have in your very own hands when you vote. For Latinas in particular, I want you to understand your power and the community you represent. 1 in 5 women in the United States today is a Latina. By 2060, that number will be 1 in 3. There are over 62 million Latinos in the United States. 36 million of those are eligible to vote. 18 million of those are Latinas. You can be game changers in this election. I know so many young people are tired of an economy that doesn't work for them, tired that opportunities seem too far away for them. It can just be overwhelming at times. But your vote, and for many of you, this is going to be your first vote in a presidential election, this is your time to yell with your whole chest that you will determine the future. You will elect the people who will reflect the future that you want to see. Your voice will be the loudest and most powerful on Election Day if you vote. Thank you.
Hello, 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 everyone. Hello, hello, hello. I am so excited to be here before you all in a room full of decision makers. I am Sharon Bodiata-Dipe, founder and executive director of Mothers of Incarcerated Sons. I am a community partner here in Pennsylvania with Register Her, a nationwide organization. Together, our organizations focus on women-centered, women-led voter engagement. That means education and registration, specifically registration, so that we can activate our power, activate our voices here in this United States of America, especially for this upcoming election. with so much on the line for us all, right? Yes. So as my colleague said, activate your power, activate your voice, activate your vote. Register to vote and get out to vote. Thank you very much.
Joining us this afternoon is the president and CEO of the American Muslim and Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council, Anila Ali, and the campaign associate of Moms Rising Together, Kelsey Reyes.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Salam, peace be on all of you, and hello, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen here as well, and young voters. As a Pakistani American, mother of a Gen Z, I stand before you with an urgent message about the power that you hold in your hands, the power to vote. Your voices matter, particularly when it comes to addressing the issues that profoundly impact your lives, such as gun violence, mental health, and the crushing burden of student debt. And by the way, even as a retired public school teacher, I am still trying to pay off my student debt. And my school district refuses to pay for my healthcare even after 17 years of service because I retired as a disabled teacher. I know that the only way I will be able to change that for others is by getting engaged, politically and civically. I'm an immigrant, a proud Pakistani American, a Muslim, a faith leader. Growing up in Pakistan, I witnessed the first democratic elections that allowed women like Benazir Bhutto, some of you may not know, but look her up, to rise to the highest office. I remember the excitement and the gravity of casting my first vote in a patriarchal system that had long denied women the right to vote, to have a voice, and to be engaged in politics. But I told my daughter, who I brought to America to be, just like you guys are, a free young woman, Sarah. I said, Sarah, just remember, God gave us rights and man took them away. And when I moved to, when I moved to America and I became a citizen, I eagerly awaited for the chance to cast my ballot here. Each vote is a testament to our hopes for change and progress, and as young Americans, you are the forefront of this vital movement. Many of you, I know, feel overwhelmed by the mental health challenges that we all face. I too suffer from anxiety and depression after losing my parents and then living in isolation during COVID and not being able to see my little Sarah for months because she was under stay-at-home orders in San Francisco. The weight of depression, anxiety, often exacerbated by financial stresses associated with college and the pervasive threat of gun violence, can feel suffocating. The reality is that these issues are not just personal battles, they're political ones, and they demand your engagement. As Martin Luther King Jr. said once, the time is always right to do what is right. Voting is not a privilege. Is not just a privilege, it is our civic duty. It is for me, it's a religious duty. It is your chance to speak out for policies that increase funding for mental health resources, implement sensible gun control measures, and ease the financial burden of education. If you choose not to participate in this process, you forfeit your right to demand change. I used to tell my students for 17 years, I said, you will not be able to complain about policies if you don't vote and if you don't get your parents to get out the vote. So young people, voting is your opportunity to change the future, and I urge all of you to get engaged. God bless all of you, and God bless America, and all of our wonderful young people. Get out the vote. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelsey Reyes. I am a campaign associate with Moms Rising, the online and on-the-ground grassroots organization with more than 1 million people working to improve family economic security, stop discrimination, and build a nation where businesses and families can thrive. We like to say Moms Rising is for moms and for anyone who's ever had a mom. Our work is about amplifying the voices of moms, moms-to-be, and families in the public debate, and voting is central to that. So, if accessing contraception, abortion, or other reproductive health care is important to you, if you're paying off student debt or will be in the future, if you want our schools, college campuses, homes, and streets to be safe from gun violence and for women and girls, if you or anyone in your family has or may have to have reduced school lunches or SNAP, if you need affordable childcare now or will in the future, if you want fair wages that are non-discriminatory against women, then you have a lot at stake at this election and you need to vote. Gen Z moms have so much at stake this November. Right now is more dangerous than ever for women to give birth in the United States than any other developed country. We have a maternal health crisis, with Black and Indigenous moms dying in childbirth at 3 times the rate than white moms. The pandemic made our maternal health crisis worse, and the Supreme Court ruling in the Dobbs case, taking away our access to abortion and other reproductive health care is making it worse still. The leaders we elect will decide if we invest in making pregnancy and childbirth safe and if we restore our reproductive rights. They will decide what motherhood looks like in America. They will decide if we are able to take paid time off from work to have babies or get sick. They will decide if food, childcare, and housing is affordable. But our votes decide who those leaders are. So, whether you're a mom or not, I hope you'll go to Moms Rising at momsrising.org and sign up to join us. And most of all, I ask you to register to vote this November. Thank you.
Now, welcome the co-founder and executive director of APIA Vote, Christine Chin, the communication coordinator for the Center of Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement, Samantha Searles, and Marzia Mohammadi, intern at the Civic Center.
Hi, everyone. As noted, I'm Christine Chen, Executive Director and co-founder of Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote. Such an exciting day and so beautiful to see all of us come together. I'm looking so forward to this very important conversation, and I really like to thank YWCA for really highlighting the voices of the Gen Z women. As a leading nonprofit dedicated to building political power for Asian American, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, we're here to increase voter and civic participation. For generations, it has been API women who have led and carried our community's civic engagement efforts, pushing our communities toward a better future. They've led the way in organizing, mobilizing, and creating change in every level from local to national elections. Especially in recent years, we've seen young API women rise to the challenge, using their voices to demand change. Despite facing marginalization and threats during the pandemic, they have not been deterred. Instead, they've actually turned out in historic numbers, making a decisive impact on our elections. In 2020, young women were at the forefront, helping to determine the outcome of the presidential election, especially in swing states such as Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Nevada. They voted so Asian American women can live free from fear with dignity and respect upheld by the law. Their voters were the margin of victory then, and they will again in 2024. For young API women, the issues are clear and urgent: jobs, housing, healthcare, protecting democracy, climate justice, and reproductive rights. These are the issues that will define our future, and they are at the heart of the movement young women are leading today. Even today, API women, right here, a couple of blocks from here, are bringing together the API community and allies across the city as they're marching together to protect a 150-year-old community, Chinatown. 5,000 of them are gathering this afternoon as they're going to be marching right now through their neighborhood as multiracial solidarity will win this campaign against team owners who want to sacrifice the last community of color in Center City here in Philadelphia for their own profits by taking over this area to build a stadium. Polling shows that an overwhelming majority of Philadelphians oppose the arena and will harm small businesses, environment, and the cultural identity of Chinatown. Similar to the right of protecting Chinatown, this movement extends beyond the API community. The stakes this year couldn't be higher. The future of our democracy hangs in the balance, and young women have the power to shape that future. We cannot allow apathy, threats, or misleading tactics to deter us from building on the progress we've made. Young women have shown time and time again that there is a force to be reckoned with, and now more than ever, their participation is crucial. By mobilizing and voting, we empower ourselves and drive meaningful change for a more inclusive society. And I'm also relying on our Gen Zs to bring out our mothers, our aunties, to also out to the polling booth. So I challenge each and every one of you to take action, pledge to vote, and then get 3 friends, family members, or neighbors to do the same. Together, we can decide this election. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sam Searles. I'm a proud member of Gen Z, and I'm the communications coordinator at Circle, the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. We're a nonpartisan, independent research organization based out of Tufts University's Tisch College of Civic Life. My colleagues study the power of young people in everything from civic education to voter turnout, to how engaged youth are in their communities, to how marginalized groups of youth are still facing challenges. And we share our research with partners who work on the ground. We work to dispel myths about young people. For instance, Gen Z has consistently voted at higher rates than other generations did at that same age. Repeat that. Gen Z has consistently voted at higher rates than other generations did at the same age. Circle is proud to be here celebrating the incredible strength and momentum of young women and gender-expansive youth, and recognizing that we still have a lot of work to do. Young women are champions of democracy, voting 10 points higher than young men did in 2020. The issues that our research tells us matter to all youth, but especially to young women, are cost of living, abortion access, climate, and gun violence. And those issues became the issues of our time because we, you, all of us, and all of them continuously talk about them everywhere, including home and school and classrooms. When we surveyed young people last year, 2/3 of young women surveyed said that they heard the most and discussed the most about political issues from people that they know, their friends, family, teachers, classmates, and coworkers. Lastly, inequities remain. In one study, women were 4 times more likely to feel qualified to hold elected office after receiving encouragement from someone like a politician, activist, or civic leader. However, Black youth in particular, and women, are also less likely to receive that kind of support and encouragement compared to young people of other races and men. Visit our table or our website to learn how research can be used as a tool for youth civic voice. We're excited to be here to listen to conversations from fellow young people who live these experiences every day, and to continue supporting all young people's political engagement for true representation and equality. Thank you.
Do you believe in travel? Do you believe in time travel? No. Well, let me tell you about the time when women had no rights and education was limited. Afghanistan traveled in time and went back to 1996. August 15th, 2021. I was glued to the news. I felt abandoned and I was wishing I had the power to vote. Our president had left the country, and the Taliban took over Afghanistan. Since then, Afghans have faced countless challenges. For example, questions of immigration and women's rights. Through the television screen, the reporter held back tears, dreading to announce that girls were forbidden to attend university or even show up in public without a male relative. This moment has hacked into my heart. At this moment, my rights were violated. I had friends who were on the verge of achieving their goals, only to have them ripped away. People protested, but had to pay back with their lives. And a few of us had the opportunity to escape for a better future. For those of us who lived, we deeply care about the right to education, participation in society, and women's rights. simply because of what we went through in our home country. I have always been trying to register people to vote, especially the youth in Afghanistan. Back there, I saw firsthand how policies and leadership can change lives overnight. When the Taliban took control, everything shifted dramatically. It doesn't end there. Afghanistan is also facing significant poverty challenges. More than 25 million Afghans live in poverty, and at least 3.6 million Afghans have fled Afghanistan since the start of 2021. The Afghan refugee crisis is one of the longest and largest displacement crises in recent history. Now, we face challenges everywhere, and that includes the United States, or more particularly, my second home, Allegheny County, where poverty affects more than 12% of the population and educational opportunities can be limited for many. These experiences made me realize how crucial it is to have a say in who leads us and how our countries are run. Today, young people across the United States have the opportunity to make a decision for a better future. In an ever-changing world, it's more important than ever to have our voices heard. As you go forward, remember the importance of your voice. Remember that you have the power to shape the future. Register to vote, stay informed, and participate in every election. Your vote is your voice, and your voice matters. Together, we can build a bright future for all, where youth leads and where gender inequality and poverty don't have a place. Now, ask yourself, will you be part of the change? Thank you.
Welcome the Director of Programs and Research for All In Together, Priya Ilangovan, the Membership Operations Assistant at the National Council of Negro Women, Ashley Rebecca Meads, and Civic Engagement Management for the American Association of People with Disabilities, Dwayne Johnson.
Hi, everyone. I just want to thank the YWCA again for bringing us together for this event and for being a huge partner to All In Together in all of the work that we do. So I'm Priya Langovan. I'm the Director of Programs and Research at All In Together. And All In Together, we're a civics education organization. So we're kind of like the unsexy side of politics. So we're dedicated to really making sure that women especially, but everyone writ large, has the tools and the knowledge and the resources that they need not only to vote, but to do everything beyond voting. So advocacy, running for office maybe someday, and all of the stuff that comes in between those things, right? Because women, and young women in particular, we often opt out of the political process because we don't think we know enough, right? Surveys show that. You could talk to people and they'll probably tell you that. But honestly, as a fellow zillennial, whatever word you use for people in the middle of millennial and Gen Z, you probably know way more than everyone else in the room, or at least exactly the same amount as anyone else. But if you need some help getting started in your civic engagement journey, you can check out the resources on our website at aitogether.org or on our social media at All In Together, and learn more about some of our in-person trainings, like our community leadership program, which I run, which is a grassroots education program dedicated to helping women to become leaders at home and their jobs and in their communities. In this election, we're also doing something a little bit different, focusing on AI-generated content and deepfakes and how that's impacting women organizers, women candidates, and other women in general, and how you as a voter and an individual can identify that information and learn how to disrupt it. So young people, we have the power to shape this election, and it's important that our voices and our ideas are valued by political campaigns and organizations. So if you are also potentially in New York City on October 15th, we'll be having our Rising Voices event as one of our in-person programs that is focused on Gen Z and young millennials. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Meads, and I'm here proudly representing NCNW, the National Council of Negro Women. NCNW has fully concreted ourselves into our new era, and we are fully committed to protecting and expanding the right to vote. And we have facilitated this effort with mobilizing our members and affiliates with our 8-state, all-state strategy. This strategy targets 17 to 24-year-olds and Black women of all ages. Our 8 states include Florida, Georgia, Ohio, North Carolina, South Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. These states are both battleground states and states that have large membership numbers within our organizations, within NCNW and our affiliates. However, this strategy is being replicated nationwide. We are partnering with local high schools to help with voter registration, as well as our collegiate members on college campuses to carry out this work and mobilize them as well. As previously mentioned, our affiliates, which includes Divine Nine sororities, faith-based and community-based organizations, are engaging with us. This is a nonpartisan effort, and we look forward to ensuring that thousands are registered to vote. We also invite all of you guys to join us and help us with this effort. I would also like to thank YWCA for opening up these partnerships and bringing us together for such a diverse collection of organizations to advocate for all voters and amplifying our Gen Z voices. Thank you.
Hello all. I'm Dwayne Johnson, and I use he, they pronouns. I'm honored to represent the American Association of People with Disabilities staff as the Civic Engagement Manager. For a quick visual description for those, I am a Black person with a beard and here to speak about the work that we're doing together. AAPD is a national cross-disability organization and committed to fighting for the full civil rights of over 70 million Americans with disabilities. Our mission is to advance equal opportunity, economic power, independent living, and political participation. As Civic Engagement Manager, my work focuses on building political power within the disability community. Now, what does that exactly mean when we say disabled or disability community? We mean anyone with a disability, whether it's someone who is blind, someone with an intellectual disability, someone who is learning to live with long COVID, someone with depression, asthma, and many others. AAPD, we have a voting rights initiative called Rev Up. Rev Up stands for Register, Educate, Vote, Use Your Power. Through our Rev Up initiative, we partner with and create grassroots disability voting coalitions to increase the accessibility of elections, amplify the priorities of disabled people, and challenge candidates and media to put disability issues on the forefront of the conversation. We have Rev Up coalitions in 20 states and disability voting partners across the country. Voting is at the heart of what we do. Imagine there are over 40 million eligible voters with disabilities in the country. Disabled people make up a quarter of the American electorate, yet despite that power, we are held back by many barriers, such as polling places, inaccessible vote by mail systems, laws that criminalize voter assistance, limited transportation, restrictive guardianship laws, and deep-seated ableism in the political process. Too many people with disabilities are being denied their sacred right to vote, and that's something we're working to change. We strive to eliminate the disability tax on voting, to break down every barrier that stands between our community and the polls, because everyone deserves the right to make their voice heard. And this is where you come in. Next week, we're hosting a Disability Voting Rights Week, a week where we come together to encourage advocacy, celebrate community, and building power. This is our chance to gather as community from coast to coast and to fight for inclusion, accessibility we deserve. Around the country, organizers will host voter registration drives, disability voting celebrations, and candidate forums and more. Disabled people have changed this nation for the better over and over again. As people with disabilities, we know how to navigate a world that wasn't built for us, a world that sometimes wants to erase, cure, or hide disabled people. When I think of some of the people most responsible for catalyzing disabled people's power at the polls, I think of amazing disabled women like Fannie Lou Hamer, who lived with polio and was further disabled by police violence as she fought for a more inclusive democracy and political process. I may add also this was in the deep Jim Crow South. I think of Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, who live with multiple sclerosis, as she championed voting rights acts and fought for language justice at the polls. I think of Rosa Mae Billinghurst, a disabled suffragette whose wheelchair was torn apart by police over and over again as she fought to establish women's rights to vote. It is through their example and the examples of so many that I know that together we will push forward and ensure that our collective power is felt at the polls and beyond. Let's make history. Let's make sure every person with a disability knows their vote matters. Together, we can create a future where barriers are broken and our democracy is truly a representative of diversity that makes a nation. So let's rise, let's vote, and let's change the world. Thank you.
Now, welcome from the Justice and Joy National Collaborative, President Jeanette Espinosa, together with the Fixing Democracy lead, Genesis Holland.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing? I promise you are so close to the Gen Z panel. We're almost there. So I'm Jeanette. I'm president of the Justice and Joy National Collaborative. We are an intergenerational gender and racial justice advocacy organization. We engage in advocacy, research, and organizing. And in all that work, we connect local to national and national to local. We are collaborative in everything that we do, and we work with and for girls, young women, and gender-expansive young people to seek justice, equity, and joy. Why are we doing this work? We have partners in about 45 states. We have young folks on the ground in about 31 states, rural, urban, and tribal communities. I was 16 when Roe passed. I was in my 60s when the Dobbs decision came down. Like many of you, I'm sure it was a personal inflection point for me, for us as an organization, and for us as a society. How did we end up here? With that, we really thought we got to do something different, right? It's just not working. How did we, over the course of my lifetime, lose what I believed was a fundamental right? So we boldly launched into work we had never done, collaboratively led by Genesis Holland and Addison Moore, who you will hear from Genesis in a minute. Addison will close us out, to really create a model of true long-term intergenerational activism, where we lead sometimes, they lead sometimes, back and forth, because I think that's how we lost. I think we lost some of our rights. Some of us got busy following the American dream, which probably was a nightmare, and so we did something different. So we jumped into Fixing Democracy, collaboratively led. We partnered with HIT Strategies and Lake Research, and we talked to young folks of color who were system impacted, young moms, trafficking survivors, low income, you name it, the most marginalizing communities around the country, because we believe they will help to save us all. So we are here because we know that our lives depend on it, because freedom depends on it, and honestly, don't we need more justice and joy in all our lives? I am now going to hand it off to Genesis, because she's really the one you should all hear from.
Y'all, I love Jeanette. So hello, everyone. As you've heard, I'm Genesis Holland, a youth leader at Justice and Joy, and I'm so glad to be in a gathering of young voices rallying to speak their truth. This is a time like no other, and sometimes it's hard to understand who and where we are as a nation on a day-to-day basis. Divided in change, together in confrontation, it leads me to wonder, how do we find truth in others? It's true we are scared. It's true we are tired, but it is also true that we are hopeful and resilient. Look at the last year. Look at the last 8. We have been on the precipice of facilitating change in the face of adversity. Reproductive justice, social justice, personal justice. If anything, current times have taught us that there is a severe chasm built on systemic oppression that we have all been subconsciously raised on. We are awakening to our own power, and every day we are becoming more aware of the limits placed on our growth. From poverty, inflation, war, genocide, redlining, things that have made us fatigue, the culture of hatred and prejudice. Excuse me, I lost my place. Another truth, the subject of American politics is infinitely hard to describe in a 5-minute segment. It's increasingly complex, and it's already built on an increasingly complex system. Each generation has its ways of representing. The older generation has the big stage and the big screen. The youth have their phones and social media, Instagram feeds. We are seeing different things. We are feeling different things. People look at the younger generation as a cut and paste avatar, unengaged and uneducated. We look at the older generation and see an unhearing partner in our own demise. It's time for us to be undivided in change, in the path for better. It's okay to be unsatisfied. It's okay to want for more. And it's also okay to listen. That's why things like the Fixing Democracy Initiative are important. Lost my place again. Be abundant in your dissatisfaction, but be blatant. It's okay to let us all know, or else it'll never be fixed. Communicate with each other. Be engaged in uncomfortable conversations, not just in your government, but in your community as well. I think people forget that, election to election. It's about community-based change. It's about local change. Change can't be made in silence, and change can't be made on your own. That's what the people who you are fighting against want, for us to fatigue, for us to tire. Fixing democracy gives you the chance to make your stances clear without party and clear without judgment. And it also gives those older the chance to listen. Are you liberated? Are you free? Do you know the difference? Would you feel it in your bones, or would it go unnoticed? Pursue the path that makes it closer to your liberation than to your shackles. Free yourselves, and in doing so, free all the people that come after you. Know there is fatigue in the fight, but there is so much strength in freedom. Do it for each other. Do it for yourselves. Do it for all those people you hope to help. You must make a nation you can be proud of, because you were not born into one that will make it for you. And listen, because none of us can do anything alone. If you want to know more, please visit the Justice and Joy table to gather more information and possibly join the Fixing Democracy Initiative. That's it.
Now, welcome to the stage YWCA USA CEO Margaret Mitchell and YWCA USA Network Learning Manager and Gen Z Advisory Council co-facilitator Melissa Gilliam.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so proud to serve as CEO for YWCA USA, and I want to thank all of you for joining us here in Philadelphia. Aren't our partners absolutely amazing? I also want to thank our presenting sponsor, Ms. Foundation for Women, and for all the partner support that we have received on this. And I want to be able to thank the YWCA board chair. Our board chair is here, Pia Wilson-Body. And our board secretary is here, Ashley Davis. I'm so grateful that they are able to join us today and for their incredible commitment to the YWCA and this movement. You know, the YWCA has been on the forefront of social change for 160 years. And our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women. And we do this by promoting peace, justice, and dignity for all. We advocate for women's rights and for racial justice by providing essential services like childcare, housing, and job training. YWCA is absolutely dedicated to social change. And we are dedicated to ensuring that absolutely every single voice is heard, especially the voices of young people. And by being here today, you all are part of the YWCA's intergenerational movement. You're joining a legacy of leaders and change makers who have worked to make this society more just and more equitable and more inclusive. You know, together, we can ensure that our future reflects the values of Gen Z. This is your moment. We want your voices to be heard, and we absolutely want your vote to be counted. I'm so excited about young women and young people, and I do believe that systematic change is going to continue. You know, in recent elections, we heard from our previous speakers, in recent elections, Gen Z is out voting and voting at higher rates than millennials and Gen Xers at your age. And as we heard earlier from our speakers, I'm absolutely floored every time I hear this number, but it is true. 8 million new voters, 8 million new voters have the potential to vote in this election and to shape the direction of our country like never before. As the most diverse, the most educated, the most technologically inclusive generation, you have the insights and the experience that is absolutely crucial to our nation's progress. Your ability to mobilize, to organize, and to inspire is absolutely unmatched. We need you. We need you to use that power, not just today, but every single day leading up to the election and beyond. And in the spirit of uplifting the next generation, it is now my absolute privilege to be able to introduce a colleague and an incredible young leader, Melissa Gilliam.
Hello, thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Margaret, for that warm welcome and introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be here in community with you all, sharing space, and I'm truly energized by the turnout. Seeing so many of you here is a powerful reminder of the impact our generation can have. We are living through a time of rapid change and unparalleled challenges, but also a time of extraordinary potential. Your presence here today speaks to your commitment to shaping our future and making a difference in our communities. Today is especially noteworthy because it's about harnessing the power of Gen Z voices, as we've already heard. As engaged citizens, we hold a unique position in driving conversations and decisions that will impact not just today, but also the years to come. Our perspectives and concerns are invaluable. We bring fresh ideas and innovative solutions to the table, and that's exactly what our world needs. As we delve into the issues that matter most to us, we must remember that our voices are essential. This is our moment to continue engaging in discussion, asking tough questions, demanding accountability, challenging the status quo, and galvanizing our collective impact. We know our activism is the key to transforming our communities and disrupting systems that perpetuate harm and injustice. Righteously opinionated, fearless in our quest for change, and more informed than ever before, we don't back down. We lean in, making noise, taking action until we see results, real results. And though we're here to speak our truth, we're also here to listen and learn from one another. United across party lines and generations, we are the heartbeat of change. By integrating voices from different generations, we create more comprehensive and sustainable solutions that address the needs of both today and tomorrow. We are worthy of sharing our stories and having our voices heard. We are worthy of a future that reflects our shared values and aspirations. We are worthy of safety, economic stability, and justice. We are worthy. And so again, I am honored to be here with you all today, and I thank you for showing up with such enthusiasm and dedication. Let's make today a turning point. Let's connect, let's inspire each other, and let's take bold steps towards the change we believe in. This town hall is more than a convening, it's a call to action. Our generation is not just the future, we are the present, whom our ancestors fought. The choices we make now will determine the path ahead, and it's clear that we're ready to take the reins. We're not waiting for change to come, we're driving it. Thank you.
Welcome to the YWomenVote 2024 National Town Hall presented by Miss Foundation for Women. Today we celebrate the dynamic voices of Gen Z. We want to hear your voice and feel your passion. As we begin our panel, please be aware that YWCA USA is a 501c3 organization, and all YWomenVote National Town Hall host organizations are participating in this event in accordance with federal rules governing 501c3 organizations. We neither support nor oppose any candidate for public office or political party. All speakers are participating in their individual capacity, and their statements are not attributable to or endorsed by the host organizations. We ask that attendees refrain from displays of support for or opposition to any candidates or political parties. Now, please welcome your host for today's program, journalist and best-selling author, Daniela Pierre Bravo.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are we feeling? Good? First off, I am so excited to welcome you to the YWomenVote 2024 Gen Z National Town Hall. We are thrilled that you're here, and it's going to be a fun, inspiring, and impactful day. We're going to discuss some of the most pressing challenges that this generation, your generation, is facing today, plus tangible tools on how to make a difference and create the change that you want to see. In these last couple of weeks, I've had a chance to work together with the YWCA team pretty closely, and I've understood a little bit more their mission. And the YWCA has a long history of empowering young leaders like you. From championing women's suffrage over 100 years ago to driving the fight for racial and gender equity today, YWCA has always been committed to young people shaping the course of history. That commitment is reflected in their Get Out the Vote initiatives, which ensures that your voices are heard and counted at the ballot box. And we know that Gen Z cares deeply about the future of this country. And through these efforts, they're making sure that your voices shape the policies that will definitely change our collective future. And that's what really was at the center of the YWomenVote National Survey that was released earlier this week. I had a chance to dive and dig into that data and reported on it earlier this week on MSNBC's Morning Joe. And one of my favorite data points from the survey is that the confidence, the young women's confidence and their level of confidence towards the power of their vote actually surged when young women were able to understand better how issues that are pressing to all Americans impacted and affected women. So you told us that if you could see how some of the country's most pressing issues affected women, then you were more likely to believe that on election day, if you showed up, your vote would count. And that is what we're going to dig into today. Issues, impact, engagement, and making sure your voice counts. We'll start with our first panel, which I'm so excited about, with members of YWCA's Gen Z Advisory Council. And we're going to hear from them on a range of issues, from racial justice, gender equity, climate change, economic security, and more. But more than that, we're going to hear their stories, we're going to hear their ideas, their solutions, and their vision for the future. Because what I love about your generation is that you're not just coming up with identifying the problems, right? You're leaning into creating change. So, should we go ahead and meet them? Let's give it up. All right, let's start out. From Atlanta, Georgia, Alicia Wicks. From New Orleans, Louisiana, Caroline Vancheri. From Los Angeles, California, Genevieve Chin. From Washington, D.C., Ollie Henry. From Tucson, Arizona, Jasmine Lopez. Also from Atlanta, Georgia, Leilani Enti. And from Seattle, Washington, Lalitha Pamedigantam. So as you may know, on Wednesday, the YWCA released this survey, the 2024 national survey, and it was the 5th election cycle conducting this survey. But what I found really interesting is that they expanded the parameters this time to really include the voices of marginalized communities that often don't get added in the discourse. So we're talking non-binary, gender expansive individuals, oversamples of Gen Z women, disabled women, Black, Latina, Asian women, Pacific Islander, and Native women. And I will tell you as a reporter, I can't tell you how much this means because there's a lot of research and data that I come across, and this breakdown is necessary and really effective if you're gonna talk about creating change. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to start out with one of the more troubling parts of the data points, and I kind of want to give you a little bit of context. So for Gen Z, for your generation, what came up in the survey was that it wasn't just 1, 2, or 3 issues that were of high importance for you. It was a number of different issues, and there's a lot of anxiety from your generation because unlike other generations, you're not just a 1 or 2 or 3 issue voter. Genevieve, I want to start with you. How do you relate to that anxiety? Does this research resonate with you? And what feels tough for your generation right now?
Yeah, I think it's very overwhelming. I know, especially when I talk to other people who are a part of Gen Z, like there's so many different issues that we feel like should have probably been resolved a long time ago, like long before we were even born. And I think that builds a lot way to like apathy. As you mentioned, there's so many issues, it feels very overwhelming, and especially like with everyone being very connected online, you can see all these issues on your phone, on your daily news, and right in your face, even if they're not directly in your community, even though most of the time they are directly into your community. 2 things I see a lot as someone who's like on a large college campus is 2 things. One, there's apathy. Sometimes people are have not had access to like civic engagement. I know, especially where I grew up, it's a large immigrant community. My parents took me out to vote at my elementary school, like when they cast their ballot, so I found memories of that. But I know that's not something I really talked about with like my classmates and my peers and their parents when we grew up. So I think that's a big thing. Like going to a public university in California, it's majority like people of color, so like also trying to determine whether that experience and whether spaces on campus are making more accessibility to have civic engagement conversations. On the flip side, there's another part where people, if they're civically engaged, they feel like their vote doesn't matter. So I live in California, and a common thing to say when the federal election comes around is California's vote doesn't matter because the state is so blue that it's gonna go Democrat anyways.
Yeah.
And I was having a really interesting conversation with Lalitha about how that's, even if your vote doesn't matter because the state's gonna turn blue, that's really important for civic engagement on like down the ballot races. Because I know a lot of people like will be like, oh, my vote doesn't matter, so why do I have to cast my vote? But also like registering for things like the federal election and being able to vote like down ballot within your local community is so important, and people often forget that with amongst all these really important federal issues, there are so many things that are from your state to local government that you also need to like look at and be mindful about because they're so impactful in your daily life.
There's so much to think about, and what you just said about social media feeling like a bombardment of so many issues at once. You know, I'm a millennial, so I had a little bit of time where social media didn't consume my life. But I was reading through the report and just thinking about how all of these issues have feel like a big stake. I was having anxiety reading through a report. I can feel very daunting. Caroline, I wonder if you have anything to say about that, specifically the great point that Genevieve made about the being online and seeing so much messaging on that end.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think amongst my community and my friends, I've had a very similar experience where it's such an inundation of information that it can easily feel very overwhelming. I think on the flip side, you have the opportunity to see what situations are like in other states and in other countries, which, while it can be really inspiring to see what the state of the world could be in your local community, it can also sometimes even feel more disheartening to see the distance and the progress that needs to be made. So it can be really hard, and I think one of my favorite analogies that I've heard for thinking about this is the idea of closing some of your mental tabs. It's very challenging. You know, your computer's running slow, you have so much open, and you're trying to do everything right. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's more effective to focus in, choose what matters most to you, and kind of prioritize those issues day to day.
Yeah, that's so well put. Jasmine, what do you have to add about this? What feels tough for you as part of this generation when it comes to having so much issues at stake?
For sure. Definitely as a Native woman, I feel split between two worlds because not only do I have to keep up with the primary and local elections, but I have to keep up with my tribal elections. I have to keep up with what's going on with my people, my ancestors, and my land, but also that connects again with the primaries because to be a Native person is to be a sovereign citizen and to control our government, our bodies, our land. That doesn't correlate with what's going on in our government and our elections. It's constantly tearing us apart and trying to figure out, well, if I vote for this, it's gonna void out because of one issue. So it's really hard to be in two worlds and then being a woman on top of that and having to worry about reproductive and abortion issues. It's a lot, but then I think about how mentors in my life have told me to think of it as an umbrella and you just have to focus on one thing because there are so many things under that umbrella and there are so many activists and people with like minds like ourselves that want to help on different issues. So by all of us being under this umbrella and this whole panel being focused on different issues is one thing that helps eases my mind and shows me that we are on our way to progression in the future.
I just want to stop and make a point of what you just said because I think it's so powerful. As a Latina DACA recipient, I can totally relate to this. Two worlds at once. And I want that to kind of sink in for a second because it goes perfectly in line with something that struck me from the report that I spoke about on Morning Joe, which is 28% of your generation thought that racial justice was one of your top issues. That was 17 percentage points more than my generation. And one of the ways that I sort of analyzed it, and I'd love for you guys, for you all to jump in on this, is racial justice is not one issue. It is the underpinning of all issues. And it goes directly to what you said, Jasmine, of feeling two worlds at once, feeling like you have to be and take care of two worlds at once. Ollie, I'd love to hear what you think. How do you think racial justice plays a role in some of the issues that are important to you?
Yeah, racial justice is, as you said, the underpinning of my advocacy and of the advocacy that so many of members of Gen Z care about. And in large part, that's because of the inception of this country. When we think of the founding of the United States, it was a group of predominantly white men establishing a society that worked in their favor, that did not take Indigenous lives into consideration, that saw Black people as 3/5 a person. And that has tangible impacts today. That impacts my experience being at a predominantly white institution in college. That impacts my experience walking down the street in Philly of the ways that people see and perceive me. It impacts the ways that I then go vote. Because all of this is interconnected, because our country, unfortunately, does have untasteful, distasteful, horrific origins. But that does not mean that we cannot move forward. And that is the work that I think everyone on this panel and everyone in this room is doing, of challenging those really horrific origins and practices that the United States is implicated in, continues to replicate today, and move beyond them and reimagine some new ways of existing and relating to each other.
Ali, that is so powerfully said, and I want to touch on your point about moving forward, because where do we go from here, right? Leilani, I know from speaking to you earlier that even the issue of economy, which is the #1 issue on average that is important to all Americans, right? Things like the cost of living have that racial underpinning. And you spoke to me very powerfully about economic justice as a top issue for you. What are you seeing as some solutions? What would you like to see?
I think that there's a lot of legislation that gets brushed under the table because of, we as Americans have a plethora of issues that we're concerned about, but we really don't focus on putting pressure on our legislators, putting pressure on those in office to pass legislation that can help with some of this. First thoughts are the Paycheck Fairness Act with helping close the gender wage gap. There are solutions, but I think it begins and ends with keeping our elected officials accountable. We can go, we can vote, but it doesn't stop with voting. It continues as you are in office representing me and what I care about, and I need to continue to push you to stay accountable to the fact that you are here representing me as a person and me and my community.
And I think what you just said is a great example to combat the stereotype that you're young, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Because you just brought up a very specific legislation, you're very informed, and that's what I'm seeing across the board from a lot of people in your generation. Lolitha, how do you see racial justice as an important part in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's what you were saying earlier about being in two worlds at the same time, right? I am Indian American. My parents immigrated here when I was a baby, and I was naturalized around the age of 7 or 8. And that has informed a lot of how I view the world. It has informed how I think of racial justice, and it has informed me how I learned about racial justice, predominantly from Black and brown women in my community in Columbus, Ohio. And I just want to say that I want to reiterate Ollie's point that we live in a white supremacist settler colonial nation that was founded on the genocide of Indigenous people and the enslavement of Black people. And we export that. We export that to countries all over the world, like the current genocide in Gaza. And I want to note that just yesterday or a couple of days ago, there was the murder of Aishinyar Ezegi Aigi, the 26-year-old recent graduate from the University of Washington, where I go to school, where she went to the West Bank to protest illegal occupation and was shot and killed. That is something that I see on my screen on social media. That is something that I feel the pain of every single day, because Palestinian Americans are feeling the pain of that every single day. And when I see what happens in other countries as a result of our foreign policy, which is funded by our taxpayer dollars, I look at my hands and I see red. I see red and I cannot see my skin anymore because it is covered in blood. It is our responsibility as Americans who can vote to hold our electeds accountable and to move forward on a ceasefire immediately, end the arms to Israel, and stop the genocide in Gaza and all over the world.
And we're going to get to the Middle East and a little bit more on that in just a second. Alicia, I want to talk to you about some of your views on DEI. I know we talked before how you're very passionate about it. I myself have written a lot and researched a lot about what's happening across the country and all of the funding that's being taken away from DEI programs. And I think, you know, there's so many ways to talk about DEI, right? DEI in corporate America, DEI in education. You brought up really good points on how DEI is affecting an issue that is important to you, which is education. Give us a little bit of the reality of what's happening with DEI and how it hits home for you, specifically on the context of education.
Sure. So what we're tending to see now are our African American children being stripped of their identities. We're seeing in different states legislation being passed for them to ban books, ban certain curriculum. These children are growing up going to predominantly white institutions and losing a piece of themselves that is very fundamental to them as an individual. And so what we need to do is we need to elect officials who are going to protect our rights, protect who we are as a people, so that way we can pass those things on to our kids and generations to come. We can't erase our history, because if we erase our history, history will repeat itself.
Erasure. I think a lot of people don't see it that way, right? And I'm glad you brought that up. The lack of DEI, it feels like erasure. That's a great point. I want to encourage anybody here in the panel who has anything else more specifically to say about DEI, because it is such a big and nuanced issue, to raise their hand. But Jasmine, I'd love to ask you, how does it look like from your purview?
Definitely, I have to add on to what was brought up about erasure of assimilation of culture, because we've seen it already happen with my ancestors and my people. We have lost our language, we have lost culture, we have lost important way of life, and we cannot let that happen again with the Black and brown people of our communities. We have to protect the people, we have to protect our population. And we see it, like we said, in education. We see it back at home in Arizona. We see it in our border, in our land. We see climate issues that indigenous knowledge is disrupted. They do not care that we took care of the land long before, and it has been healthy, and now it is stripped of its natural resources, and they don't want to take our education and advice, because indigenous knowledge is not scholarly knowledge in colleges and institutions, because they're predominantly white. So it's an issue that stems everywhere, because we have our borders, that the Border Patrol constantly harasses our people, and that's another thing that goes with DEI, that we need inclusion. We need people like ourselves in positions of power, so that way our people are not overran, they're not harassed, and we can be ourselves and all emphasize our cultures and be the nation that we were meant to be and be a blend.
Yeah. Alicia, I'll go to you in just a second. I just want to mention something that you made me think of. And, you know, when we think about DEI and the defunding in schools, something struck me when I was reporting in Alabama specifically. There was a school that was predominantly white, and because of DEI funding, they were able to create a Latino community which gave resources to bilingual tours. Okay, I grew up undocumented, and I was the first person of my family to go to college, and I can't imagine the difference it would make for families, especially who are, you know, parents that have never went to school here or not from here. The immense help, just that little program that has bilingual tours, how much of a difference it could make for families like mine and first generation and immigrant families. And that is one example of what it looks like to have a defunding of DEI. Alicia, go ahead.
I just want to highlight on what Jasmine's saying. As we can see, every minority group is suffering, and that's a problem. So when you go out and vote, be passionate and have a purpose. You can hold your elected officials accountable. If they say they can't do it, they can do it. We've seen them be flexible when it comes to a certain demographic of races or ethnicity. They can do it for us as well. So don't accept no as an answer. You have to stay on top of them and make sure that they're doing what they're doing and for what is going to benefit us, right? And so make sure that they are being very effective and very efficient. We don't have time to wait. We've been waiting.
We could talk about DEI. I think could have a whole panel on DEI. But I want to turn to climate change because, of course, climate change has come up one after another poll saying that it's one of the most important issues in your generation. Obviously, a big concern as we near election day. But outside of other generations, your generation is like the most concerned and acutely aware of climate change. And Caroline, I want to come to you because you're from Louisiana, which we know is a state that has suffered the brunt from a number of natural disasters. And I would love to know how this issue of climate change hits home for you.
Definitely. I think there are a lot of news headlines and all kinds of statistics around the storms and the assets lost and the impact of climate change that's already hitting Louisiana. But really what comes to mind for me is a story from whenever I was moving into college. I went to Louisiana State University, and when I moved in August 2016, there was an unexpected flood that struck the south central part of Louisiana, and it resulted in significant damage across the community as well as delays to our college move-in. And so what this meant was that the first weekends of my college experience were actually spent volunteering in the community, going out, stripping out carpets and sheetrock and insulation from homes that had had feet of water inside, completely unexpectedly, an unnamed storm. And while I was volunteering at this one woman's house, she was an elderly woman, and we were bringing all of this debris out to the front curb, setting it out there, and I saw a book on a piece of furniture that was out at the curb. And I went over and took a look at what this book was, and it was actually her wedding album. And it had been completely destroyed by the water that went into the house. And I think, while of course that's not a multi-million-dollar asset loss, that is real. And people are losing and will continue to lose things that matter to them from climate change. While the impacts are environmental and economic, they are also personal. And I think that we are looking to our leaders to see what is happening, to take it seriously, and to prioritize policies that will support the communities that are dealing with these challenges and avoid further strain on the environment.
Yeah. Jasmine, I know that you work with Indigenous communities specifically to get them to register to vote. Tell me how important this issue of climate change is for those communities.
For sure. Talking to a lot of youth and getting them actually registered to vote, that's one of the #1 things they bring up to me is that, well, why do I have to vote if, one, they're not going to take my vote serious, and two, they say that the world is ending. And I tell them, no, let's take a step back. Let's really think about this because we're living in today. We're living right now. And that vote, that's going to help the vote that you're casting. That's going to happen within the next year. That's going to happen almost immediately in your community. So it is a big issue that they want positive change on climate change. They want politicians to care about us and to care about our community and to care about the personal reasons that the personal value that climate change is causing us to lose. So there are youth, there are people out there that are scared and worried about climate change, and we are looking to you politicians, to you policy change makers to help us, to help our communities, and don't leave us out there wondering, is our vote even gonna matter? Do they even care about the voice I put out there? We're asking for your help, politicians.
Yeah. I want to pivot to abortion access, obviously, because it's dominated so much in these last couple of years since the overturning of Roe and has had an immense impact state by state as we've seen restrictions on reproductive rights. Lalitha, I want to hear if this is an issue that is big enough for you to show up at the polls. Is it your #1 issue, #2, #3?
Absolutely. I think it absolutely is my top 3 because I am from Ohio, where our incredible organizers did an amazing job of putting abortion on the ballot and won last year. But it is always, yes, thank you, claps for Ohio. But it is always, always, always on the chopping block, especially in Ohio. And now I live in Washington, which is a safe state. I'm actually on the board of Pro-Choice Washington, and I've been learning a lot about what abortion access looks like in Washington because it's a safe state, and there's an influx of people going to Washington. Abortion clinics are struggling to keep up with the demand, which is a great time to pitch. Please donate to your local abortion clinics. They are really struggling, especially in election years when people donate to much bigger organizations. And it is startling. It is startling to me and scary to me that abortion keeps being hung over our heads is either a prize or a threat, and it is neither. It is a sacred right to our own bodies, to our autonomy, and it's not just for women, it's for all people who need access to reproductive health care. All people need it, all people deserve it, and we will not lose it. We won't. One way or another, we won't.
Leilani, I'd love to hear how this issue hits home for you.
I think it hits home, especially when thinking about providers of reproductive health care. Women hold 2/3 of our national student debt. Women hold 2/3 of our national student debt, and women of color hold the majority of that debt. And healthcare providers who are going to school and dedicating their lives to this practice are now being told that they have to choose between their profession and abiding by the ethical promises that they made to their communities. And I think that if we're really deciding that we need to uphold each other as a community, reproductive health care is, as Lalitha said, not just because of abortion access. Everybody needs reproductive health care, and reproductive health providers deserve to practice what they were trained to do. And I think that we need to not only increase reproductive health care access, but also increase the amount of reproductive health care providers that we have. Half of counties in Georgia do not have reproductive health care providers. They do not have OBGYNs. This is a problem. We all need it. We all need to continue pushing for it. And this is a worldwide issue.
That is so powerfully said. I did a specific report on Idaho and how much there's an exodus of just general doctors because of the abortion restrictions in the state. Genevieve, did you want to add anything from your perspective about the importance of access to abortion and how important it is for your generation?
I think reproductive health is, as everyone has reiterated time and time again, is so important, especially for communities of color that lack access to comprehensive sexual education. In addition to rural communities and people in other states. I think as from a personal stance, I go see an OBGYN because I have unique issues with periods and ovarian issues. And if I lived in another state, I wouldn't be able to do that. But I live in California and I get to have this access to prevent things like getting ovarian cancer. And those are I can't imagine not having that. And I think that's something that is very that a lot of Gen Z understand, and even if they are not someone who are impacted by those issues.
Yeah. You're so right, and I think like you mentioned, there's a domino effect that has come through all of these restrictions of abortion access. You know, the exodus of general doctors, you know, the difficulties there are now with things like IVF. And it's interesting, you know, your generation gets it. Your generation gets the domino effect. Caroline, you've lived in Texas for the last 4 years. How is it playing out there?
Yeah, I think the situation is definitely really challenging, and even as a person who's had the privilege of not being in need of acute medical care or procedures, you know, thinking about it more holistically in terms of reproductive health care and receiving the health care that you need, it's really challenging because I'm thinking to myself now, like, oh, well, my OBGYN, do I align politically with them? And that's something I have to think about, which is, you know, kind of ridiculous and should be unnecessary. And I think additionally, just in terms of general health maintenance, things about like tracking your period and keeping track of things like that that are not just about pregnancy or abortion, or it's not even political, right? You're just trying to keep yourself healthy. Now there's this fear that that's going to be used against us. Yeah. And that is, frankly, heartbreaking, especially in a country that has the worst performance in maternal mortality of any developed country. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Again, we could have a whole panel on this specific topic. I have a couple of audience questions that I want to get to in just a bit, but I want to expand it a little bit to access to healthcare, which is also one of the big issues that came up through the research. Ollie, I know you have a personal experience that shows why the access to affordable healthcare is so important.
Yeah. So for a good half of my college experience, about a year, little over, I was underinsured. I did not have healthcare. And specifically as a disabled person, that was extremely difficult. Trying to navigate, okay, what urgent cares can I see? How do I get Medicaid access? Why is Medicaid taking so long? Why are there no providers once I do have Medicaid? I would have had to travel over 2 hours to go see a specialist that I desperately needed to see. That is ridiculous. I was trying to finish my classes. I was trying to graduate as a senior at university, yet I was conflicted with, okay, how do I try to pay these medical bills? How do I try to figure out healthcare without major parental support? And that was incredibly difficult, and that is an experience that is far too common, especially for Black queer individuals. So getting access to genuine, authentic, gender-affirming services in terms of healthcare is extremely difficult. In DC, there is a wonderful healthcare provider, Whitman Walker. They specialize in queer services, making sure that queer folks have what they need when it comes to healthcare. Their services, unfortunately, because of funding issues, don't have the list of different specialists that, as a disabled person, I needed access to. So that meant I then had to go to other places, having to speak with doctors that did not recognize or understand my gender identity, who thought that my gender identity somehow conflated with my ability to understand myself and my very real bodily needs and pains. Essentially, doctors, especially when you're perceived as a Black femme to many doctors, they're looking for any reason to dismiss your symptoms. I hear the murmurs in the audience, yeah, like we know this. And it is a real problem because it prevents us from getting the care that we need. I have had multiple family members pass sooner than what they had to because of doctors dismissing pain.
Wow.
My aunt passed in her 60s because of pain that she felt in her back 10 years prior that the doctors just fully ignored. Came to be that it was actually a tumor. Those sorts of things are completely avoidable if we have doctors that are, one, accessible, two, believe us. When I'm in pain, believe me. When I tell you that I am in pain, I know my body best.
Thank you, Ollie, for really giving us a better understanding and the kind of intersections. Because I think a lot of us think, access to healthcare, oh, that's for older generations, right? It's not something that Gen Z is thinking about. But they are, and it's deeply personal for you. You talked a little bit about the solutions and what you'd like to see, but I'd love for you to kind of tell us a little bit more. Is it better training that doctors need specifically in this area? Is it legislation? And for people here who actually want to help create a difference, what can we do?
Okay, I see multiple tiers of support needed. So first, for our doctors need to have the funding and also the time so that they are not rushing from appointment to appointment. They're actually able to sit with you and listen. That would have made such a big difference in many appointments. Then I also think it goes back to training. Doctors often are not given any comprehensive DEIA training about what access and accessibility looks like, even in the hospital room. So thinking of tables or chairs that are able to lift so that disabled folks are able to get onto an operating area, that sort of thing. Just basic access in a clinical setting. So doctors is one area. Then another area is politicians and the policies that we have in place. To the points that we've been talking about abortion access, making sure that the policies we have in place are actually designed to support people in getting access, in getting care. That is crucial. We need to make sure that healthcare is accessible, affordable, and everyone can have it. Healthcare is a right, period. If we don't have healthcare, what do we have?
So amazingly said. Thank you for that, Ollie. I want to pivot to another part of the research that I found fascinating, which is the number of women your age that rated sexual violence as an issue that they worry about. And I encourage you all to go and look at the full report because there are some really interesting data points under this umbrella. One of them that I think really hit home was the online harassment. Your generation is twice as likely to have online harassment than other generations. And I wonder, Jasmine, why do you think that has become such an important focus? Why is this happening?
Definitely. There is many different issues around sexual violence and online. One, that we're Gen Z, and that online is kind of like our second life. If you're not online, then you're not alive. But I definitely feel like this, for me, would relate to the murdered and missing Indigenous people. This happened, it's like we see it online all the time. New relative gone, new relative missing, new relative found dead on the street. It's real life, and we see it, but what are we doing to fix it? Like, I've been to different events where the focus is murdered and missing Indigenous people, and we are trying hard to get the word out there and to get people to care about Native people, but there is no correlation when it comes to our government officials, because yes, they say that they care for our people, but what are you actually doing to make sure that, one, the people that are out hunting my relatives are trialed, and then two, what are you doing to protect the people on the reservations that, one, may not even have access to reliable connectivity, and three, like, it's just the tribal issues and federal issues, they align, but I feel like there is no empathy there, and when there is, it's not enough for people to actually go out and do something about it.
I'm glad you brought this up, because these stats obviously affect more communities of color than others. Just in the research, 93% support policy solutions for violence, harassment, and discrimination in the workplace. 92% support legislation for gender-based violence. Again, things that we don't think about on a day-to-day basis, but specifically for communities of color, these numbers were incredibly high, as you can hear. Leilani, I want to pivot to, again, what we had talked about with the online harassment bit. I'm sure you're online, many of you are online. Have you guys thought of any solutions when it comes to creating a safer space online, especially on social?
I think that creating a safer space online, and especially in terms of sexual harassment and assault, starts in our schools, especially in the K through 12 space, where really students, part of the reason why they're there is to learn how to interact socially with one another. And I think that social media and online connectivity has been kind of shunned in educational spaces as something that is separate from education, or something that is a part of our society that is kind of taboo, something that we shouldn't talk about. But if we really want students to learn and children to learn how to be in community with one another, we need to meet them where they are at. And where we're at is online. Teaching students what sexual assault is, what defines sexual assault, the intricacies of it, not that what sexual assault can mean in various contexts, including online, is, I think, the responsibility of our education system, and ultimately the responsibility of our politicians as those who create the systems of education that we're in.
Beautifully said. Alicia, I wonder if you have anything else to add here, especially as we think about whether social media hurts or helps as a vehicle to have these conversations.
Absolutely. So social media, it can be very beneficial, and then it could be our downfall. We use social media to be able to have an outlet to get our news, get our information. However, we do have instances where there is some type of harassment or individuals are having unwanted attention. I think it goes back to legislation where we can learn these things while we're developing. When we go back to the psychological aspect of it, through these age gaps, that's when your brain is developing and you're learning these things. You have the space to do that at school, but when we have individuals going in and changing our curriculum and changing the way that we process those day-to-day interactions with one another, it ultimately kind of messes up and snowballs how an individual acts later down the line.
And we saw in the research that for members of non-binary community, this harassment online is higher. So the more intersecting identities that you have, the more harassment that you will experience online. Ali, I wonder if you have anything else to add here on creating safer spaces for dialogue online.
I think it's necessary more than anything. The digital world is the world that we are in, especially for people with disabilities. Speaking for myself specifically, online spaces are sometimes the only space I can access. If I can't get out of bed, I still want to be social. I still want to talk to friends. I still want to be invested and involved in community. And online spaces are the way to do that. But when people are using that as a space to spew hate and to like genuinely cause harm to others, that keeps me from being able to participate. That keeps me from being able to be in community. So really those online spaces, we need better legislation around what does internet safety look like while also still preserving the free thought and beautiful connections that are able to develop on social media. I think that there are some folks in the tech space who are doing a really great job of that, but that's work that we have to get more people doing it, because a lot of our politicians, let's be real, they're older. So do they fully understand what's happening on TikTok?
No.
That's up for debate. So let's see what we can do to get more people in the room who really know tech, who know social media, who know what we're doing to really engage with each other.
A lot of different hands here. This is an interesting topic, I know, for all of you. Caroline, we can go first, and then Genevieve.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think I completely agree with the points made, and I think to your point, Leilani, about like the education and having these discussions a bit more openly, because I think it is something that goes without being said a lot. And you know, as like a woman, you may receive messages or certain things online that you're like, you know, I did not ask for this, certainly not. And you don't really know what to do with it. You maybe will joke about it to a friend, and like, what are your options, right? You report them on Instagram, and that just doesn't really feel like much of a solution. And so I think there's still a lot that needs to be developed in terms of like, how do we better moderate and educate individuals on like how to handle these situations.
Let me ask you guys, ask you all about this. Do you think this is a matter for big tech to step in? Is it government that should step in? Who thinks it's big tech that should be the ones making sure across the line that this is secure?
Is both an option?
Both.
Yes,
both.
both.
There you go, both. Genevieve.
So I'm a computer science student, and my long goals aspiration is to work in industry and then advise on tech policy. So these are issues really important to me because they're not talked enough, at all. And especially when they impact things like sexual violence, within our society, also child safety. These are really important issues. They come down to multiple things of having tech companies have more inclusive workplaces. Women leave the tech industry in droves. Even though it's been more inclusive, now it's been higher populations of women. It's even in my degree program, my degree program is only 30% women.
Wow.
And then once you get into industry, that diminishes, especially when people become mothers or have other societal obligations that are put upon women. They leave, and that leaves A, they sometimes leave because of toxic workplaces, or B, it also impacts how technology is developed if you're only being developed by groups of people who are already marginalizing other people in their workspace. But I think within that is so important to make sure that there's a partnership between tech companies and between government. There's been a large question of some tech leaders say government should be regulating us, and then government doesn't do anything. And then I think Ollie made this point, there are lawmakers that know nothing about technology. It always goes back to that really iconic quote where it's where Mark Zuckerberg was telling a senator, we run ads, and that's it. No, that's not good enough at all. So this needs to change. I'm glad that this was brought up on this topic because it's something not talked about widely from a legislative standpoint of what can big tech do and what can government do, especially when it comes to child safety, when it comes to making sure free speech is still protected, but people can't just go off on people and continue to violate others online.
Again, we need a whole panel on this issue. Lalitha, and then Leilani.
Yeah, absolutely. So I totally agree with my fellow panelists up here. I did want to point out one thing that it's really, really important when we talk about online safety, that we look at the communities that do it the best. There have been communities online for ages since the internet has begun that have been taking care of their own communities, in fan spaces and fandom spaces, online forums and communities are full of marginalized, mostly disabled people who have come together to try to keep each other safe. So listening to them, because when we think about the internet, we don't really think about it in terms of like, oh, there are like marginalized corners of the internet, but there are. And we have to think about listening to those voices when we create policies around this, because otherwise we risk censorship. We risk losing free thought. We risk losing a lot of the really amazing parts of the internet that have brought us into this age, into this day. The other thing I want to say as well is that with social media, a lot of us are constantly thinking about how to keep ourselves safe, both from like being a woman and receiving that hatred online, but also your mental safety and like being online and going joke, 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 genocide, something to buy, joke, 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 and that is really, really taxing on the human mind.
So true.
The thing I have to say about that is I think we have to feel the pain. I think we have to build up our capacity to understand that human suffering is endless, but hold each other in community and know that even if the pain is endless, so is the joy of being together. So is the joy of caring for one another. And so even though we will see horrific acts of violence on the internet. Just the other day, I saw multiple people who survived the school shooting in Georgia come online and talk about their experience. My heart shattered into a million pieces that the first thing that they thought that they could do, the only thing that they could do was get online and talk to people online. That's so messed up. But it also teaches us that we are resilient online when we are together online. That's how we protect each other.
Such a good point. Elon?
Yeah, just adding on, I think that we can definitely discuss government and big tech, but the point of online community is that it's a community. It's built up of all of us, and if these systems are harmful, we all, as part of that community that decides to be online, are sustaining that harm. And we can't take the blame off of ourselves as individuals and the responsibility off of ourselves as individuals. You see something online that you think is harmful, say something. It's on you just as much as it is on anybody else. It's on us to push our government, and it's on us to push big tech to create legislation, to create systems that will better protect us, but it's also on us as individuals.
So well said. I want to get to some audience questions. I know you guys, you all submitted some questions. But I want to do some rapid fire before we get there. If we can just kind of go down the line here. Caroline, we'll start with you. Okay. Are you excited about November, and what do you want politicians to know about the power of your vote?
Yes, I am excited. I'm interested and curious for November, certainly so. And I think what I would want politicians to know is that like Gen Z is here and is excited to participate. And while it may take different ways of engaging us, like we are a ready audience and we want to be captivated. So like engage us.
You're ready. Genevieve?
Yes. No. Sorry. I'm
so much on your brain. I get it.
Like,
excitement.
I feel like in SoCal people say yes, no, and it doesn't make any sense at all. But like I'm so used to saying that. Yeah, but like Gen Z is ready and here to vote. For example, like I was talking to other people. This is my first time that I've been like old enough to vote in a federal election.
Amazing.
And I am very excited and very.
Who's the first time voting here? Genevieve. Okay, amazing. What about in the audience? Any first time voters? You guys have been there, done that. Okay, some in the back. Awesome. Awesome. Genevieve, sorry.
Yeah, and that's so true for so many people on my college campus and people and youth outside of school. And especially in the time of what we talked about, social media, this is ever more pressing about how across the country, no matter where we are, no matter if we're in California, no matter if we're in Pennsylvania, these are things that we're seeing directly impact the lives of us and everyone else across the country. So, yeah.
Jasmine, what do you want politicians to know about the power of your vote?
I want politicians to know that I am Indigenous, resilient, and strong, and so are my people. And we are coming to take over the polls. We are coming to be a voice for not only for our ancestors that couldn't vote, but to be a voice for the people who still are not able to vote, and for the people that cannot even get the strength out of bed to vote. I'm here to represent you. I want to be a good voice, and I want politicians to be afraid to lose their position. I want you guys to know that Gen Z is not afraid to come for your positions. Gen Z is not afraid to kick you out. We will get somebody there that wants to represent us, that wants to fight for us. So be afraid.
I want folks to know, I want politicians to know that I will vote you in and I will vote you out, but I will also be there the day after you're sworn in your office, fighting for my people, fighting for what I deserve, for my future, and I'm tired of begging for my life. I will be safe in this country, and people around the world will be safe, and we will continue fighting for it as Gen Z.
Ollie?
This election is incredibly important, and the relationships that we build as we prepare for this election are what are going to get us through the next 4, 10, 40, 400 years. I am thinking about the long-term game here, and when I think of all of the Gen Z folks who are here on this panel, who are here in the audience, who are doing this work, I am so excited for the changes that we will make, because we are not allowing our voices to be silenced. We refuse for politicians to go sit in their seats and not follow up on the promises that they made. We are pushing them, as Lalitha said, to do their jobs.
Ilani?
Gen Z is resilient. We have proven that time and time and time again. We are resilient, we are hardworking, and if you refuse to do your job to the capacity that we need you to, we will take your job. And we will do that with pride. So,
Alicia.
Absolutely. My message to politicians are, we are watching. I'm looking at your track record. I'm looking at what you want to do to benefit not only African American women, but women of color, women nationally, globally, locally, in our communities. What are you doing to impact us day to day? And that's very crucial, and that's something that I'm going to stay on top of you on.
Okay, one more rapid round before we get to audience questions. Alicia, I'll start with you. In a few words, what do you think is the biggest misconception about your generation? One or two
not
words.
educated.
That you're not educated.
Educated.
100% that we're not educated.
Ollie?
That we're not experts in our own stories.
That we'll give up.
That we don't care about what's going on in the world.
That we're naive. That we care more about likes than change.
Wow, amazing, right? Okay, let's get to some audience questions. The first one is, and feel free to, any of you can answer this. How do you respond to people you're trying to get registered to vote who say, I don't get into politics? And Jasmine, I think you might be a good person to start here.
I definitely could relate, because being in both worlds at once, I hear that from both sides, but then I think about a conversation earlier in university with another Indigenous scholar. They said to be Native is to be political. That's so true. Being Native is political. Being a woman is political. Being alive is political. Just doing anything is political. So if you're going to use money, going to go pay for something or get a good, you are political. So it doesn't matter if you don't want to care. Just care at least by one thing. Just care about one issue. And even if it just starts from there, it's going to trickle on, and you're going to realize, wow, I can make change. I can actually go out there and do things that I want to do and make a positive effect for my community.
Alicia, did you want to add something?
Absolutely. Outside of this panel, I am a very big pillar in my community in terms of civic engagement and voter education, as well as registration. I'm actually here today representing the National Council of Negro Women. I am the Gen Z spokesperson, as well as the social action chair for the Clark-Atlanta University section. We host several different voter registration drives. The last date, so if you guys are not registered to vote, check your voter registration status. The last date to register to vote is October 7th in order to participate in the November election. What I do is I explain to them 9 times out of 10 when someone comes up to me and says that they're not educated. I'm going to explain to you why, like Jasmine said, everything that you do is political. Unfortunately, that's something that is our reality. And so you have to be very passionate and very potent on certain things, so that way they know to take us seriously. Because if we don't take ourselves seriously, how can we expect for someone else to do that?
Another great point as to why racial justice is that underpinning of so many issues.
Absolutely.
Want to move to another question around gun violence. YWomenVote survey data showed us that gun violence and mass shootings are one of, obviously, the top issues for Gen Z women. And of course, just this week, our world was rocked again by a school shooting that took the lives of 2 freshmen who are only 14, and 2 teachers. For Gen Z, you haven't ever known a time when such tragedies didn't happen. Can you talk to us about how you think what would make a difference and what you want the next president, Congress, governors, and other elected officials to do to make your world safe from gun violence? Who wants to tackle this one first?
I think there are so many things, but I think just as a start, right, like making it harder to buy a gun, like that is just like the minimum. And I think, you know, growing up in Louisiana, and I lived in Texas the last 4 years, like guns and the culture of guns is certainly very prevalent. And it reminds me of this very specific story, which is that I had the opportunity to spend a year as an exchange student living in Spain. In Spain, guns are not available. They only, like the police and the army and the military have guns. And I was speaking to a friend from Louisiana and talking about my experience. I was 17, and I was talking about walking home late at night by myself. And he said to me, "Oh my gosh, did you feel so unsafe because no one has a gun?" And I was like, no, I feel so safe because no one has a gun. And so I think that like it's so ingrained in the culture of parts of our country. And so there's a big challenge around like changing that and having these conversations with people.
Yep.
Exactly. But I think like at minimum, in terms of policy, making it more challenging and having, you know, the validations that need to be in place to make sure the guns aren't getting in the hands of incorrect people.
And I just want to say the pause that you guys all had, I can imagine, is the exhaustion of hearing that question over and over again. So appreciate you starting us off with that. You want to go ahead and?
Yeah, I want to just plus one that because I think that's clearly the only way to at least start making our country safer. I have a very similar story. I actually just got back from India visiting my family, and late at night, it was like 11 or maybe midnight, in our neighborhood, there was a residential party for a wedding. It was a residential area, but there was a party for a wedding, and fireworks went off. And I sat up straight in bed thinking that there were gunshots. And I looked over at my dad, and he was like, "That doesn't happen here." And then I went back to sleep, and you know, I was giggling about it with my friend or my cousins the next day. But the truth is that it is so traumatizing that it is always in the back of my mind if I go to a mall, if I go to this conference, if I go anywhere, that I have to look around and look at where the exits are because I want to keep myself safe in the case of a mass shooting. That is the reality that we live with, and we need to make it harder to purchase guns.
Genevieve.
I think to your point where you're saying like that person was, your friend was like, don't you feel unsafe because there's no guns around? Like, I don't think guns should be the default safety mechanism. So of course in California, everyone drives. There's a big thing about parents teaching their kids, don't get into road rage because that person might have a gun and they might kill you. No one should have to tell their child that you're gonna get shot on a freeway road rage accident. It's happened, I've watched the news like throughout high school, throughout college, seeing that happen. And that's even in California where there are stricter gun laws compared to other states. Like that should not be the status.
Right. Thank you all for answering that. I want to go to another question on mental health. Obviously, it's an issue that has emerged as central to Gen Z. On that same vein, 47% of Gen Z said it was central to their identity, and 75% said it was very important for policymakers to address. I mean, what would make a difference here?
I definitely think that lawmakers could make policies that help people with mental health issues to be covered by their, like if they need to time out for school or for work, we should not be punished for that. We should be able to have the refreshment we need and be able to be 100% ourselves and not be struggling and thinking all these awful things when we're just cashing people out doing our job. It's important for us to take a step back and really evaluate what's going on in our life. That way we can keep being 100% ourselves and keeping the advocates we can be.
I want to take Ollie, want to just contextualize this a little bit. You know, I'm from a different generation where mental health, I think, I mean, you all know this, hasn't really been talked about. And I think a lot of people look at your generation and assume that because the conversation has been in the ether in the last 5 years, a little bit more full throttle, that your generation is obviously acutely aware of mental health, but that has the language around how to talk about mental health. And I want to see if that's right or not. But Ollie, I'll go to you first.
I definitely think that Gen Z has a language around mental health that just we haven't seen before. I think a big part of that is because of the pandemic and the social isolation that was lockdown.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I was in my senior year, I was excited to finish everything out, and then one day we just didn't go back to school. And that isolation, for so many of my friends, that meant being in home environments that were not safe, where they could not be queer, where they could not be trans, where they did not have access to therapy services that were culturally competent, where they did not have access to the basic things that they really needed in terms of social engagement. That takes a huge toll on someone's mental health.
Right.
And it was in online communities that we really started, at least for myself, started getting more of that language. Started learning more of, okay, this is what this means, how can I get support? And that was essential. And now we know that, oh, wait, mental health is actually integral for us to do anything else in life.
Yeah.
Mental health is just as important as physical health, as spiritual health, any other form of health. Because if your mental isn't right, how can you go through the day? How can you go through life?
Right, such a good point. Genevieve?
Where I grew up in a part of LA where it's like largely immigrant community, and there's roughly like half like Asian and half Latino, which are notoriously two communities that mental health is either stigmatized or just is it's not real. Like it's just not real at all. And there's the mix of generational trauma coming from the immigrant community. There's so many ways that you cannot articulate, even seeing like older folks in your community suffering through things that they themselves can feel but cannot articulate and are told are things wrong with them. And they shouldn't bring it up to anyone.
And that is such a good point, because as I was hearing Ali talk, I was thinking about how the issue of mental health as a whole, right, for our whole society is, developing in terms of there's more of a conversation around it. But now it's communities of color. I'm from the Latino family that you talk about. Our mental health was for the crazy uncle who drank too much, right? And so even with our communities of color, there's almost like an extra step, right, that we have to do to create safety around these issues. Alicia, go ahead.
Absolutely. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. And so I think just to highlight on what Genevieve was saying, the African American community, we are just now getting around to accepting mental health. And so if our communities can do it, our politicians can do it as well. And I think it all kind of revolves around money. Everything revolves around money. So whether it's physical, mental, you need money to go get these professionals to figure out whatever is going on with you. It can be very overwhelming if your provider cannot provide these services for you. And just like we were talking, the DEI in clinical settings, it's also very overwhelming to be going through something mentally and for someone to say, I don't believe you, or not treat you with the proper respect, or give you a lending hand. So,
and the issue sometimes, Alicia, is sometimes it comes from our own families, right?
Absolutely.
I come from an immigrant family. You'll be fine. Our family went through way worse, right? Leilani.
Yeah, I think just seconding that, I would say that there's two hurdles, because there is the stigma, but there's also this generational trauma that comes from being from a minority community where our ancestors haven't even fully worked this out, and this is being passed down through generations and compounding. And I think that there has to be, education. For me, education is a huge tool, especially like those formative years education, kindergarten, pre-K, K through 12 education of what is mental health. I think we have developed a language around mental health. Now, how do we make this situation better for generations that are coming after us?
This topic is so interesting to me. Want to go to one of the final questions here from our audience. This is really interesting, and it's on childcare. Childcare is an issue that turned out to be really important to Gen Z, which is incredible, in the YWomenVote survey. And of course, we know that childcare is even more important, again, for communities of color. Does anyone here have any thoughts about why Gen Z is thinking about this? What would help to address this concern?
Well, I'm on a little bit of the older side of Gen Z. I'll be turning 27 this year, and I am married. And so my partner and I want to make decisions that are good for our futures, financially speaking. And I might be at a little bit of an advantage, having been in the YWCA family before, having worked for a YW before, and having a lot of information on the childcare statistics. But it is really threatening to our financial future to think about paying for childcare. It should not cost as much as going to an Ivy League school to pay for childcare. That is absurd. And in thinking about that and in dreaming about this future that we might want, it is so hard to make those decisions in the present day, knowing that that is going to be where our wallet is going to be hit the hardest in our future. And we are getting there. Like, Gen Z is not a bunch of 12 or 13-year-olds anymore, right? Like, we are getting there. We're getting to the point where we're thinking seriously about our futures.
I love that you brought up that point because it goes back, circling back to what we said at the beginning, which is when we think about the issues that are important to this generation, not one, not two or three, it's things like childcare that also have to do with the cost of living, with education, right, with the economy. And so I'm glad you brought that up because it gives us a better understanding how this is very holistic. One thing compounds into another. So thank you for that answer. Jasmine?
I definitely just want to emphasize that, like, our generation is struggling to even think about buying a house or even just affording our monthly rent. That on top of wanting to live a full life and have a successful career and find a healthy, happy marriage and create a beautiful environment for the next generation. That's something we definitely want to do just as the people before us did, but we can't afford it. We can barely afford putting food on the table every week. It's drastically expensive out here and it's a much different environment than the generations before us. And we hear all this negativity of, well, why don't you have this? You're this old. Why don't you do this? You're this old. Well, we can't. You grew up in a different time than we did. We are doing what we can because the environment is just completely different these days.
Yeah. Childcare is such a big issue, but it wouldn't seem obvious. So thank you for clarifying that. Just a few minutes left of the panel. A question about your need. What is your need for elected officials? Like, I know we talked a lot about so many issues that are important to you, but if there were candidates sitting right in front of here, what do you need? Caroline.
I would say that I need,
and maybe this is a question about to help you mobilize better.
Okay.
So what are the resources that you need in order to make your enthusiasm about all of the issues that we talked about that are important to you count?
I think I need clear guidance on how to mobilize. Like, what does that look like? Tell me where I live, what does that look like? And there are so many good organizations here that are working to do that. And I think that I need a real commitment that the issues I care about will be acted upon once this person is elected.
Genevieve?
I agree. I think we need accountability and commitment. And a big thing I was thinking of is that we need politicians who are not just like appeasing to whichever like super PAC has the most money to fund their campaign. It's like we elected you not to just keep like raising money to be elected the next season. We want you to like actually make action now. And that's the reason why we elected you, not so that you can keep fundraising just to get reelected.
Jasmine?
I need government officials that actually go out into our communities and connect with the community members to see what they actually need, to see what their community needs to be supported, and to see what our students need for them to carry on the next generation. I want policymakers that truly care about the people that they are trying to represent.
This is a job interview. You better come prepared. You better come prepared to answer my questions and tell me exactly how you're going to earn my vote. There is no free ride, not in a red state, not in a swing state, not in a blue state. You have to earn my vote. I will be listening to what you say about both domestic and foreign policy. I will be waiting to hear what you say about a ceasefire. I will be waiting to hear what you say about abortion and all these other issues that we've discussed today. This is a job interview. You do not get in for free.
Holly.
One, to listen, to actually listen and when I say listen, I mean I want a seat at the table, but not only the seat that you created, I want to create my own seat where I am comfortable, when I can exist just as I am, and you will hear me and you will listen. When Gen Z is screaming, when we are protesting in the streets, listen to us.
Leilani? This goes specifically out to all of my incumbents out there. Do your job. We put you here for a reason. We will take you out. I see your voting record. I see your statements. We will replace you. We will replace you. I feel like most politicians nowadays do not have this, especially incumbents, do not have as much of a fear of being replaced as they should. You are here for one job and one job only, so either do it or move out the way.
Alicia, what do you need to see?
Absolutely. I think I'm going to piggyback off of what Ali said. If we feel as though we don't have a seat at the table, we will build our own. And we will run it the way we see fit. And whether that means whatever you agree with or whatever we agree with, we're going to run it how we see fit, how we feel comfortable in society, how we are viewed, and how it's benefiting us and our communities. So we will build our own table if need be.
Okay, final question, and I love rapid fires, so Alicia, I'll start with you. In a few words, when you think about voting in your future, who are you voting for in terms of, are you voting for yourself? Are you voting for your mom and dad? Who are you voting for, Alicia?
I'm voting for my community. Voting rights really hit home for me once I moved down to Atlanta, Georgia. I really was able to see, like, back at home, I saw the surface level issues within our community until I got down in an environment that I wasn't really known in, or that I wasn't really knowledgeable about their issues. But I see that my community is hurting, and it can be because of generational things, but it also can be things that can be fixed within the government. And if that means that I have to run myself, then that's what I'll do.
Leilani, quickly.
I'm voting for the people that don't have the right to vote, because there's a lot of people in this country that don't have the right to vote. I'm voting for somebody who was incarcerated that no longer has the privilege to vote. I am voting for my relatives that immigrated to this country and do not have citizenship to be able to vote.
Holly?
I'm voting for my Black trans kin who became ancestors too soon.
Letha?
I'm voting for the people of Palestine, Sudan, Congo, Bangladesh, India, the rest of the world, and Ohio.
I'm voting for my ancestors who fought for the right and for the future generations to come.
I'm voting for people who are disenfranchised in their own communities.
I'm voting for the next generation.
I want to thank you all for being so incredible, so articulate, so detailed and informative on this conversation. Y'all, can we give it up for this crew? You're looking at 7 of the next presidents, I feel, right? Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. You can go off that way. And we will be back in just 3 minutes with our next panel, Mobilizing Gen Z Voters. We'll be right back.
As we begin the next phase of our program, please be aware that YWCA USA is a 501c3 organization, and all YWomenVote National Town Hall host organizations are participating in this event in accordance with federal rules governing 501c3 organizations. We neither support nor oppose any candidate for public office or political party. All speakers are participating in their individual capacity, and their statements are not attributable to or endorsed by the host organizations. Please take your seats. Our program will resume in 3 minutes. Please take your seats. Our program will resume in 1 minute. Please silence your mobile devices. Thank you. Now, please welcome back your host, Daniela Pierre Bravo.
How incredible was that panel, everyone? I mean, are you kidding? They were so good. So we've heard a little bit about what issues are important to Gen Z, and now we're going to dive into how to take all of that energy into action. While we hoped that the presidential candidates could have joined us today, with the debate in 3 days, we were not able to make it, but rest assured, we have 3 extraordinary experts here with us who are going to teach us how to mobilize all this enthusiasm that we just heard into actual change. So, I want to welcome to the stage Roshni Nedangadi, who is the co-founder of HIT Strategies. You guys can clap. Beth Link, Executive Director of When We All Vote. And Sara Mora, Immigrant Rights Activist and Digital Storyteller. So I want to start with you, Roshni. If you could set the scene a little bit for us, because I mentioned this at the beginning of opening up here, which is there was an interesting data point on the survey which you worked on and helped put everything together on this idea that if you can show young women the connection between the issues that are most pressing to them and how they connect specifically to the impact of women, other women in their community, or themselves, that they're more likely to feel like their vote actually matters on election day.
Yeah, I think that this is such an important point, and I wanted to start by saying thank you all so much for having me here. At HIT Strategies, we really focus on talking to groups that we call the emerging electorate. So lots of groups of people of color, young voters, Gen Z, millennials, LGBTQ folks, basically folks who have been marginalized, especially in other research. And we're so blessed to work with organizations like the YWCA, like Justice and Joy, who actually invest in deep oversampling in some of these marginalized communities, because it's so important for us to have a full understanding. When we're talking about young women and Gen Z young women and gender expansive young folks, it's so important to have this full understanding of what is going on in all of their lives. Especially when Gen Z is our most diverse generation in our nation's history. So I want to take a step back before I answer your question and talk a little bit about what we have seen in some of our qualitative and quantitative work with these young women and young non-binary folks over the last few years, which is this real sense of apathy and cynicism when they're thinking about the government and when they're thinking about voting. And I feel like oftentimes older generations, especially elected representatives and those in government, take that apathy and cynicism to mean that these young folks don't care. And that is so far from the truth. Young people and young women especially care so deeply about the issues that impact them and their communities. They just don't understand necessarily how to connect the issues that are important to them to what action they should take to improve those issues. And that's why we're all here to talk about, how to mobilize these young folks to take action. I think especially important in this idea is that they don't think that the government works for them. And I want to be very clear when I say this. They don't think the government works for them. They are very clear-eyed about the fact that the government works the way it is intended, for the people it is intended to work for. Wealthy folks, old white men, powerful corporations. So they don't see, there's a barrier to entry for young folks and for young voters when that is how they perceive the government, and then they don't understand how exactly to make change within that system. But this gives us a lot of openings to talk about policies in a way that resonate with these young voters. So going back to your question, we talked about, they really think about themselves in community and in relationship with people. And I think that you heard that, especially in this last question with our young panelists, when asked who they vote for, none of them said themselves. And so often when we are talking about, in survey research, we ask a question over and over again, what's the most important issue to you? And of course, we asked that in this survey, and our young Gen Z women said that the most important issues to them were the economy, were healthcare, were abortion access. But we took it a step further and asked, what are the most important issues to women? And they had slightly different answers. When we asked this question, what are the most important issues to women, they said domestic violence, abortion access, and childcare. And in fact, when we then tested messages to try and mobilize these young women, the messages that were most resonant for them were ones that centered around policies and actions around domestic violence, around childcare, around abortion access. So young women are thinking about themselves very differently. They're thinking about themselves in the collective. When we ask how they identify themselves, it is in terms of their relationships with others, as a mother, as a sister, as a caregiver, as a wife, and not as individuals. So we need to rethink the way that we're talking about policies and messaging to these young women in order to bring them in and consider their full experiences when we're trying to engage them in voting.
When we talk about messaging and you talk about what's going to propel them to actually come out, you said it best, it's the power of how they think about their vote, or it's the confidence that they feel about the power of their vote. Beth, you've worked for the administration, you have worked on the ground, you know a lot about messaging, right? What works here? How can candidates and leaders be able to fill in that gap between presenting issues and connecting it to communities, which the research already showed us, if women can be connected to how issues affect their communities of other women and themselves, they're more likely to go out and vote.
100%. And I think, you know, I really appreciate you starting and anchoring us in that fallacy, really, that young people don't care. You know, the previous conversation laid that to rest, period, and the data backs that up, that young people are incredibly activated and energized. Women, non-binary people are leading the way when it comes to building our democracy and fighting for democracy that actually serves us. And that is something that we're seeing day in and day out, and it's really the issues that are motivating this generation and young women in particular. When we're having conversations with folks, the things that really resonate and engage are those issues, and it's really first starting with listening and asking, you know, what do you care about? Here's how the systems impact that issue, right? It's engaging in a conversation and really just taking it to basics and really, really listening. The issues that are obviously popping up to the top include abortion, the economic justice, climate change, gun violence, all of the things that you hear day in and day out, but that really anchoring it in what do you care about? How do you engage? Certainly that's something that leaders and organizations and organizers can do, but that's also something each and every one of us can do in the conversations that we're having in our group chats, in direct messages, in casual conversation with family, friends, and community. At When We All Vote, one of the things that we try and do is provide the tools to be able to take that conversation and casual conversation about what do you care about. Well, you know, this is how not just, you know, the presidential candidate or the Senate or the congressional candidate or even your governor, but here's how your mayor, here's how your city council might impact that issue. Or don't you know, abortion is on the ballot in the form of a ballot measure in, you know, Arizona and any number of other states where it has been added to the ballot to arm us as leaders in our lives and in our communities with those tools so that we can have those conversations and really be those ambassadors day in and day out within our own communities to ignite those conversations, but take it there to then action. So you can sign up for a voter registration portal or utilize the portal that we have in partnership with YWCA to then in that group chat, in that direct message say, okay, and now are you registered to vote? Are you not sure? Just check your voter registration. That's an easy thing to do. And if you're not, then if you're not registered, then there's additional steps. So there's that. So it's one, what do you care about? What are those issues? And then let's talk about action and not leave a wide gap between those issues and the actions and calls to actions that people can take. The last thing I will just say is, you know, more generally, and this is something that's bared out at different points in my career in talking and engaging communities, is that consistently it's really about what's in it for me, how can I help protect myself, my family, and the ones I love and I care about. We are doing that, whether it's, you know, making sure that the resources that are being provided, whether you're from government, from your community, are connected with the action of voting or participating in democracy. So very specifically, many of us have student loan debt. If you're working through that process to either get some relief on that student loan debt, we work on some student loan clinics so that folks can get resources to go through that process to get some of the additional resources that are available to get that relief. At the end of that conversation too, it's about, all right, this is a resource that is helpful, beneficial. Here's a real action you were able to take to help you in your life. Now here's another step that you can take as we look to make sure that, you know, we're connecting how you're getting that help, that relief, that support with the steps that you have taken to participate in democracy and make your voice heard. It's not that disconnected, and I think all of us can help close that gap between what seems like sometimes a pretty abstract concept of, you know, engaging, voting, and you're like, okay, when am I going to see the results? But sometimes the results are there. It's about us connecting those dots for people.
And I so resonate with what you said about this kind of civic engagement piece. There's so much, I think now, particularly this election cycle, with what I'm seeing on a reporting end from women, that they're not just waiting till election day to think that all of their issues are going to be taken care of. They're thinking about ways of engaging their community now, thinking about how their local leaders are going to make a difference in certain issues like access to abortion again, of course. Sara, I wanna go to you because you have done a really good job as an immigrant right activist and digital storyteller about having these conversations and building community around a topic that is very personal to you, and I want you to get into your story a little bit because you're a DACA recipient, formerly undocumented, just like myself, and you've really been able to galvanize a community of people that might not have felt like there was a community there for them. I can speak for myself, you know, being undocumented, you feel really alone, and you've created a space online to create community of people that are now informed. And you tell us, are they excited about Election Day? Are their friends and families excited for Election Day to help that community? We're talking about immigrant community.
I mean, I can't really speak for everyone. I want to be very clear when I say, like, I'm one activist, and that's important in the work that I do. To be very specific, you know, one day I got to share my story, and after multiple sharings in different spaces and in different lights and having a passion for communication, I went viral, and I thought about the power of my story because of powerful women around me that said, your story is powerful and it is making a difference. So I don't know about everyone, but I know, you know, we have to be very honest about the election that's coming up and what that means for immigrant communities. Realistically, what's on the table on both presidential candidates is a very harsh reality, right? We're not talking about a clear, comprehensive immigration reform. We're talking about more shadows and more blurred lines and conversations around what undocumented communities look like now. DACA is a temporary status passed in 2012 under the Obama administration. It is the most viral sensation to many because, right, it's DACA dreamers, you're a DACA, and it's important that people got that far to even knowing. But realistically, that's one status out of so many that defines how people migrate and what they get to be categorized under. And that doesn't even really describe the urgency with which they migrate, right? Healthcare is not the same in every country. It's really a desperation for some people to receive healthcare here, but that's really just, again, one issue of the many. And so to answer the question short, I don't think people are excited, but as somebody in immigration reform, I'm not going to measure the room. I'm going to really make sure that I do my best to inform people of what candidates are providing, what they're saying they're going to represent during their presidency, right? We have to make sure our community understands what that means and obviously pick our best. And also, you know, remind them that voting is not the only way we get civically engaged. Local communities don't disappear after elections, and the work that people do, even like at the YWCA, doesn't go away, right? It's 24/7 and it's all the time, and it's really important for things to stay local because a national election happens every 4 years, but that work stays forever, and everybody has to continue to exist. So yeah.
I wonder if that says something about the culture of voting in this community. Like you well said, it's not just about voting on Election Day, but it's about all of the other things that you do and the organizations that you're a part of and the activism or civic engagement that you have within other communities, right? Not just on Election Day. For the leaders out there, and I know we're being live streamed and there's some watch parties, leaders like you who feel that may have different stories, that may have the same story as you, what do you think is important for them to know if they want to change the mind of somebody about their story who might not get it or who want to use their story to be able to galvanize change?
Yeah, I would say one day I was a temporary status girl sharing my story before the president of Costa Rica with my mom's encouragement, who's right here. And I was scared, and my mom was like, we're doing this. And like, I did it, but I was scared. I'm like, who am I, right? Why should I do this? What difference is it gonna make? And I don't encourage anyone, I need to be really clear, to expose your status. I do not encourage that. I did that. And that was something that I maybe didn't make as aware as I am now, but I did it with a lot of faith because I believe in Jesus, and I had faith in my heart that I had a purpose sharing my story. And so when I shared my story, I shared it with a desire for this president to know he wasn't here for a hello and a picture. He was here to understand the necessities of this community and to understand the potential of diplomatic communities, because we don't grow up in low-income schools understanding diplomacy. You don't know ambassadors. And when you take a picture out of gratitude because you don't understand what that is. No crecemos entendiendo la diplomacia, ni los embajadores, ni las instituciones de relaciones internacionales, but wealthy families do. And that's not where we stop. We're talking about relationships, government, politics, power, who's elected into our offices in local cities. We don't know that. At least I didn't, and I know my friends didn't either. And so I forgot where we were talking about, but when I first shared my story, I thought nobody was gonna care. And when I worked at nonprofit, it was really hard because the funding wasn't necessarily allocated for storytellers, right? Mm-hmm. There was a lot more priorities, and so I could have quit a lot of times, but I realized the thing is, like, art and creating is part of the movement. Yes. That was in the civil rights movement. It's in movements across the world, so there is room, and sometimes if the room you're in is not the one that has the room, it doesn't mean your ability to talk a certain way, create a certain way, help others see things in a certain way isn't real. What? Of course it's real. You have a purpose. You are a light. Mm-hmm.
It reminds me what the panel before this said about living in two different worlds and grappling with that in the midst of an election cycle and having to be two things at once. And Roshni, I wonder if you could speak to this, because it reminds me of what they said about the anxiety, right? That they have to be a lot of things at once, that they feel pressure all at once. And I wonder what you have to say about this and how it has an effect on the culture of voting.
Yeah, it's a really difficult thing to try and get to, especially when we're talking in research terms. When we have a survey in the field, we can ask a set of questions that people can give a set of responses to, but it's really important to open those up and talk to people more in a one-on-one setting. And so we do a lot of qualitative work, like focus groups, to sit and talk with young people, with young women, about what's important to them, to figure out the why behind some of this. And a lot of times, going back to my previous response, when we're thinking about this kind of sense of apathy and governments not doing anything, it's when we talk to them about the why, it's because they think that there are just so many problems in the country right now, and they don't see people working to solve those problems in any sort of systemic way or in a way that's relatable or understandable to them. So also, like I was saying, young women really think of themselves in community and their relationship to other people in their community, whether that's their family, whether that's their neighbors, whether that's their friends or folks in their workplace. And so taking on not only the burden of the issues that are really important to them, but taking it on for themselves and for their communities leads to a lot of this kind of anxiety and sort of paralysis as to, like, what can I really do about this? These are huge governmental challenges and problems. What can little old me do to solve these problems? And so reframing the way that we talk to these young women, reframing the way that we message them, to not talk about individualism and what you can do, but what collectively your community can do and what your community has done to make real change and really impact people's lives is so important. Talking about policies that have passed previously, talking about small measures that can impact people in your community, even talking about the history of voting and the history of protest movements and how those types of movements have created change in the country that was not necessarily overnight, but took a lot of work from a community. Those are really strong messaging frames for young women to step back and think, okay, this doesn't have to all be on my shoulders. We can approach this collectively, and we have approached this collectively and been successful in the past. So hopefully we can see success in the future.
And speaking on these anxieties, Beth, what are some of these strategies out there to help manage election anxiety, if there's such a thing? Yeah. And what opportunities do candidates have?
Yeah, so I think, election anxiety is real, and it's because the issues that are at play that we really care about are so existential and so intertwined with who I am, my dignity, to my ability to control my own body, or my ability to keep myself and my family safe, or to care for my family. And that is so core and very visceral and real. It is not, a reason to kind of check out or to disengage, and actually that's not what we're seeing when we ask people, how are you feeling? When We All Vote, we partnered with Headspace, and we launched a partnership around election anxiety, elections, or politics without panic, and we launched that on the night of the first debate, and we're able to share resources like simple things that you can do, like meditation, or curtailing your news intake if that really is contributing negatively to your mental health, or a feeling of just a heightened anxiety or paralysis, keeping an eye on and monitoring your social media intake and what that actually is feeling like with yourself, and continually checking in with yourself. But also in that Politics Without Panic resource guide is the fact, and really it bears out in the research, that taking action and making a plan can also be helpful as you are trying to manage those feelings of powerlessness, of my voice might not matter, I'm actually not, those questions of, does it actually matter? Does anyone actually care what I think? The answer is yes, we do. Yes, your voice matters. Yes, you have power and you have value. Here are some of the ways that you can engage. And so filling some of those gaps, and particularly reminding young women, it is surprising to me when I hear again and again that many young women do question, does my voice have power? Is it actually going to matter? Us saying that again and again, one, combats that anxiety that we know is very real, and really encourages folks to make your voice heard and to engage in the process. So there's that. The last thing, and just to say a little bit of a bright spot, we have some new data and polling that we did in partnership with Headspace that'll actually come out this week. But one of the bright spots in that is that overwhelmingly the majority of folks that we surveyed are planning to participate, including 1 in 5 folks who did not vote in previous elections that feel so motivated that they are planning to vote this year.
That's interesting. What is the main root of that new enthusiasm and vigor that they're having now that they didn't have before?
I think this is. I think that there's a few reasons why folks are feeling some of that new energy. One, it's the issues. It's this feeling of I'm voting for myself and I'm voting for my future and my family. I care about issues like abortion, like economic justice, or like gun violence, and I want to make sure that we are seeing a sea change. Very real. These issues are literally on the ballot. I think that's part of it. The second piece of it is really an opportunity, and frankly, to see reflected back at them, well, actually, my voice matters if I'm seeing more representation like myself in politics. See change in terms of who's making these decisions, then maybe my voice actually does matter. In recent elections, we've seen more diverse people in power. I think of Gabe Amo, first Black representative out of Rhode Island. I think of the first Black woman to lead the city of Philadelphia. And there's a myriad of other examples across the country where folks are stepping up and leading to seize those reins and move the ball forward. So I think folks are taking back that power and feeling that vigor.
Fascinating. Looking forward to looking at that poll. Back to this sort of sense of anxiety, marginalized communities obviously bear the burden on this. When you think about mixed status families, when you think about families from an immigration perspective that can't vote, voter disenfranchisement. Sada, your audience, part of your audience doesn't have status, right? When you talk about immigration rights. How do you stay encouraging, right? From a perspective of educating, getting people the education that they need about certain laws or things that are coming up without that feeling of disillusionment that comes from being from a community that can't engage in voting like other communities?
I mean, I feel like by consequence, the work I do is more about information and action than emotion, because realistically, immigration reform hasn't moved at a pace that would be hopeful ever. So then I would really be speaking negatively 24/7 if my poems focused on the status of migration. I would just be crying in my poetry. But like in my work with community and in any space, I try to stick to actions and spaces and real things happening in the moment, and also speaking clearly, because I mean realistically, because of how long migration has happened, systems have been created to kind of either over-terrorize or badly inform immigrant communities. And then, without even getting to language barriers, so I stay encouraging. I know I have to be, because that's the work. The whole point of the work is to inform updated pieces of information and make sure any partnership I'm part of is actualized information. So people don't think of immigrant communities as these far away, unable to talk people, or as me being the leader of everyone, because there's a lot of leaders doing a lot of variety of things.
Well, on that end, how do you stay positive, right? Because you're part of Gen Z who has a very real stake when it comes to immigration rights, and you're online talking about these issues, informing them with all of the different updates, whether it's DACA, whether it's keeping families together, whether it's all these lawsuits. How do you stay hopeful?
Yeah, I actually just remember that in 2016 that Trump was elected, right? When he was elected into office, a lot of dreamers, like a lot of DACA recipients, varied statuses, we were advocating on Capitol Hill for immigration reform. We were literally knocking on the doors of our congresspeople to advocate for better. And I was really scared that we were gonna be deported. And the reality is a lot of communities were broken down by ICE, and families were deported. And so the way that I take care of myself as somebody with a responsibility in different platforms is I am going back to school, and I'm at the gym every day if I can be. And I do these things for myself, right? It's not connected to, in the beginning I was like, this is for my people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to take a step back and really just do this for myself. But I was saying it with an intention when I said this is for my community, because I'm like, what mentor am I gonna be if I'm literally always tired and anxious? And it's like, why? Because I'm in work that is always moving. Yeah. And so when I did like the gym and school, it was ways of taking back things that I wanted to do, but felt like there was no room to do in a really urgent changing country. And so I hope that by doing that, I really think I can help other youth and people believe in their ability to dream, because that's a dream too, finishing school and going to the gym and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just one thing on that, and because we were having this conversation about anxiety and how to manage it, I think what you just shared is so
I'm also in therapy, sorry to cut you off. Like my school pays for therapy, so I'm like, what? Free therapy? Like therapy is expensive. So I'm in therapy every week, and I really feel like in my personal relationships, I strive to encourage it. But our communities, at times, it could be complicated to talk about therapy. It's like, you're trying to call me crazy, and it's like, so that is something, that's a bridge to get to at some point.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that as movement leaders, and I think for everyone here in the room and who's listening, we can feel selfish if it's like, I'm gonna take time for myself, I'm gonna, take a step back, take that run in the morning, take a break. You have to in order to actually do the work and do the work long term too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I want to pivot to social media in this last few section of time that we have. Roshni, I want you to sort of contextualize for us this bit of information on the survey about the fact that Gen Z suffer double the amount of online harassment than any other generation. Why is this happening?
The short answer is that Gen Z is just online more. but it is a really staggering number. I think it was 12% of women overall in our survey reported that they experienced online harassment in the last 12 months, and 26% of Gen Z women. This is like 1 out of every 4 Gen Z women has experienced harassment online in the last 12 months. It's a factor of them being online more and having all of their relationships and community being online as well. I think you were saying in the last panel, I myself, being a millennial, had the privilege of growing up without social media.
Yeah.
And so my communities and relationships were not on social media. But I've talked to a number of young folks who work at HIT and my cousins and family, and their entire relationships and systems of community are online. And so they're just experiencing it more there. And it's something that we don't talk about enough, but it is so important, just as we're trying to decrease levels of harassment out in the real world, talking face-to-face, people-to-people. We should be putting the same focus on decreasing levels of harassment online.
And I wonder, Roshni, if any of this has to do with the fact that there's so many issues that feel so real to people, and we see people talk over each other all the time. Whether it's the war in the Middle East, whether it's immigration, right? There's some strong words being shared. And part of it, I wonder if it's the inability to communicate language in a way that gives dignity to communities of color. Sada, I think about the post that you did, which I talk all the time about. I work, I used to work at a news organization, thinking about the word, for example, illegal immigrants. And you made a wonderful post about explaining why this word is horrific and why we should use, a different identifier. It almost seems nonsensical for you to explain why, but explain why, and kind of if you can touch on the context of why is that important for all of these things in terms of online harassment and dignifying communities of color, especially as we go into an election year. We're there, an election cycle, yeah.
Yeah, I think when we think of the power of language, it could be thought of in so many ways. So like the word illegal was coined at a certain time. It wasn't always like that. There was a time where people that were immigrants were called undocumented because they didn't have documents. And that word did get coined and it stuck. And now it's a leading word aside from borders, conversations, and everything. And on top of the fact that there's language barriers for immigrant communities, this word illegal literally is taking a big percentage of the country. We're not 50%, but I'm pretty sure immigrants, I don't know the number of how much immigrants there are in the country, but immigration is not stopping. I do know in numbers, it's a steady reality. And like, I'm smiling, but really I'm just like, oh my God, the word illegal has the power to literally take a person from seeing somebody as a human to a product in seconds. And so if just this room decided and felt convicted in their minds to be like, I'm not using that word no more, because wow, that really does make people go from products to, from people to products. That would change 50% more people. And sometimes I feel like my passion with words is that the fact that you could change one word, you could change perception. When you start to see somebody as undocumented, you might ask yourself the question, how and why and when, but in all these things, and that's what, in my opinion, those in power don't want us to do. Because if we ask how and why and when, we realize the people next to us do have commonalities. I didn't say we're identical, but we do have commonalities. And so I even started a campaign online to try to think of radio personalities that are part of these conversations, that make sure we're checking people that want to be checked, or even those who don't, to think about that word illegal and how it completely desensitizes people to the reality of humans migrating at all urgency levels, because migration cannot be defined by one person interviewed. And that is the problem. That is the difficult part, but that is all communities.
It also makes me think about our previous panel when we talk about language and communities of color and the word erasure. That comes up when you use words like this. Beth, I'd love to see if you have any advice as many of us go online and want to talk about communities, whether they represent our own or whether it's communities that are important to us through our networks, on language on how to articulate effectively about marginalized communities and their needs.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, whenever there is language that erases our individualism or erases our humanity or disrespects us, we have to be alert and we have to be on guard, and we have to actively be pushing against that. As someone who my ancestors were slaves, my ancestors desegregated schools in Detroit and were called out of their names or were dehumanized in a very systemic and clear way. And that's something that we continue to fight against. We have to be on guard, always. As we think very specifically about how we can do that actively, there's very clear language, like not using the word illegal and using that as a term. But also think about issues that we talk about. So if you're talking about crime and criminals, who are you talking about? What do you mean? Can we talk about public safety? Can we talk about the issue and the solution in the future that we're going to be looking toward? Can we talk about everyone actually being safe from any kind of violence, right? So, I think that it's going a bit deeper and taking another layer. The second part of this, I think, just to take it a bit wider, is an opportunity to think about misinformation and how we engage online. So, we hear a lot about disinformation. Disinformation is that willful inserting of bad information to move specific groups in one way or another, to move you away from voting, to move you away from the resources that you need. But misinformation can be just as insidious, which is just bad information percolating, or bad language percolating and spreading and going wider. So one of the things that we really focus on at When We All Vote is making sure that we have very easily digestible, clear language and tools and messaging on social media where young people live. The vast majority of young people in Gen Z spend a very significant amount of time online. About half of the group, though, is saying, hey, I'm actually not getting information about voting and about democracy online and in those spaces that I'm showing up. And particularly, maybe not necessarily information that I can trust. So our team spends a lot of time researching, making sure that those dates and deadlines are correct, how you can request your voter absentee and early voting process, and information about issues is information that you can lean on. So for everyone here, share that information, because even if you feel like you're seeing it a lot, other people in your group may not. So share that information and share that. And then again, be on guard for information that doesn't look quite right or that looks inaccurate, even from sources you might trust. There are some examples where, the state of New York had some language around or polling locations and same-day voter registration that was incorrect. They corrected it and it got out, but just be mindful and be on guard.
And that's a really important thing, especially when you talk about the discourse online and so many issues that charge the emotions of people, and your instinct is to immediately share, right? And I wonder if you have any tips for those Gen Z leaders out there who want to be a part of being more of an educator on certain issues. What is your advice on a gut check when it comes to misinformation or disinformation and sharing online?
Yeah, the one thing I will, say is know your sources and know resources and organizations that you can lean on. Obviously, the YWCA is an incredible resource for voter education and resources about the issues that are top of mind. Obviously, at When We All Vote, you can come. We have those shareable explainers and resources and talking points. We also have weall.vote/public, which is a resource of a myriad of voter hub information in terms of those dates and deadlines, or why we vote topics around different issues for different states and topics that you might care about. So that's one, right? Just take know your sources, have a cadre of organizations or entities that you can really rely on. The second thing, though, and I think, I'm just really grateful to you for sharing your story and the power of your voice, but also grounding us at the beginning about the power of storytelling. It's not just about, parroting or sharing the same content over and over again. Yes, that is helpful, and we know, a mode of communication is that repetition helps cement information. But it is also about telling your why and making, getting that, reputable and accurate information, and then pairing that with your story. What do you care about? That might also inspire people in your network to do the same, to share what they care about and pass it on. So that would be the two things I would say there.
We're out of time, but I do want to do just a quick rapid fire in a few words. There's so much change that I feel that people are now energized to go and do. What is your one or two pieces of advice on mobilizing these issues to action? Roshni, do you want to go first?
Sure. I would say focus the message and be as specific as possible to the audience that you're speaking to. So actually do the research, find out what is important to the young women that you're talking to, what issues are important, what they care about, what their values are, who in their community they're advocating for, and speak to them about those issues. Because the more that they can connect their political behavior, including voting, to seeing direct change, the more that they will be activated and participate.
Sarah?
I don't know. I was still trying to think. Sorry, that was fast.
Oh no. Well, I mean, you have such a big platform. You've been able to amplify so much educational pieces, and I think, again, we're having a watch party across the nation here of Gen Z leaders that look to you and say, how can I do that? How can I use my story? How can I use my voice and use social media as a tool to amplify that?
Yeah, I would say don't wait for everyone to support it. That's something really important. If it's a particular policy or a particular action, kind of just be the leader for that cause before anyone else does. And don't be surprised that people care and people really do want to do something about it. There's just a lot of issues, especially thinking of the internet. I think it could be easy to get overwhelmed and be like, oh my God, there's so much to fight for.
Yeah.
Where do I even start?
Right.
I'm tired just looking at all this information. So being realistic about a few action calls that people can take to the issue you're representing, I feel like it's something that helps me a lot.
Mm-hmm. Beth?
You are the next generation of voters. You are the next generation of voters. Be brave. You don't have to do it alone. Lean on your community, and we will all reap the benefits.
I just want to say thank you three so much for this panel. Let's give it up for them. Appreciate each and every one of you. And I just want to say a shout out to the YWCA for having me here today. I've been working with them pretty closely these last few weeks, and I'm so glad that I have, because the work that you're doing is really changing the way that we view ourselves, our power, and the ability to create change for others. So let's give it up for the YWCA one more time. And to close this afternoon's town hall, please welcome back to the stage YWCA's Melissa Gillum and from Justice and Joy Collaborative, Addison Moore. Thank you so much. Want to go that way?
Yes. Wow. I mean, that was a really incredible event. Am I right? Who is fired up? Let's hear it. I mean, I'm ready to go to the polls right now. I'm ready to go to the polls right now. Somebody call me a Lyft or Uber. So we've heard from so many powerful voices and diverse perspectives from our amazing panel of Gen Z leaders, and today has truly showcased the passion and leadership that defines our generation. Thank you to everyone who joined us, whether you're here in person or tuning in through the live stream. You are what make events like this so impactful.
Absolutely. And we know that we as Gen Z aren't just talking about change. We're out there making it happen. And as we head into the last 58 days before this election, the work doesn't stop here. Let's not let this energy fade away. It's time to take action and bring in your community and beyond to become more civically engaged. To encourage young people to talk about voting in their communities, I'd like to take a moment to proudly announce Justice and Joy's Rapid Response Fund, which is a fund that is led by youth for youth to get funds into the hands of young people to encourage them and their communities to engage in conversations around voting. So as we close out today, I'd love for folks to look into your community and find an accountability partner or partners and to check in with each other on how you're taking action.
Let's take the insights and passion from today and channel them into real-world impact. Start by identifying one actionable step that you can take this week and in the weeks to come to advance the goals we've discussed. Whether it's organizing, registering voters, joining a campaign, or simply spreading the word, every action, no matter how small, can contribute to positive change to help build a stronger, more engaged community. Every action counts.
Exactly. Together, we have the power to drive change and create the more inclusive, just, and equitable world we envision. For cis and trans women and girls, non-binary people, disabled people, people of color, and other many marginalized groups. So let's keep the momentum going beyond today. Thank you again to our panelists, our audience, our amazing host partners, and everyone who's been a part of this movement. Let's go out there and make our voices shape the future.
Remember, change doesn't happen overnight. It often starts with a single conversation or a small action. If you need help figuring out your next steps to stay in this work, check out our website, YWomenVote.org, or email YWomenVotePartners@YWCA.org, and that is a letter Y, YWomenVote. And don't forget to stop by the tables in room 115 to learn more about how you can get involved in nonpartisan Get Out the Vote activities with the host and partners of this event.
Thank you all so much. And remember, we're in this together. Let's stay informed, stay activated, and get everyone into polls 2024 and beyond. Together, let's make history. But I got one more thing for us. If y'all don't mind, I would love everyone to stand up, grab the posters in your seats, and if you don't mind facing that stage in the back, we're gonna take a big group photo together. Yeah, where everyone's gonna be in this photo together.
Try to gather in the center if you can.
If everyone can move to the center of the room as well. Oh,
Thank you, Ashley. We did it, Joe. Oh, we're still on mic.
Oh, we are still very mic. Oh, I am.
Cheese. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.